Take us away.
All right, cool. Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. You guys have all had a good start, well, good week so far, and hopefully it ends well. Um, Excited to jump into today's conversation. We've got a lot to cover per usual. So we'll go ahead and get started. Our objectives today, we're going to start by trying to wrap up the commercial proposals for the low energy carbon code commercial section. Hopefully that won't take too long. We only have a couple remaining. Then we'll spend about an hour today to talk about the home size proposals that came through from several board members and try to get some resolution there. And then with whatever time we have left, we will focus on working through our residential proposals. So how that shakes out on the agenda, like I said, just a short chunk of time this morning to wrap up our commercial proposals, about an hour for the home size proposals. At 10:40, we'll give you guys a break for 5 minutes, and then for the rest of our time together, we'll jump into residential proposals. And as always, just a reminder to be keeping up with public comment as they come in. As of the last meeting, we didn't have any new public comments come in, but just always something to keep at the forefront of your minds. And with that, maybe we can move to approving the meeting minutes from meeting 24, which were sent out last Friday. So I will wait to hear if there's a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Tim. Do I hear a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you, Ron. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from meeting 24, please say aye.
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 And all those opposed to approving the meeting minutes from meeting 24, please say nay. All right, wonderful. Meeting minutes from meeting 24 are approved, and we will get those up on CEO's website shortly. Okay, so let's jump right in today. Hopefully you guys all have your coffee in front of you, or tea, whatever you enjoy, or water. Also good. Our proposal format is going to follow the same format that we have did for the last meeting. So we'll aim for about 10 minutes per proposal for the commercial section. That's 1 minute for board members to present their thoughts, 8 minutes for discussion, and then we'll try to wrap it up with the straw poll. I will be loosely keeping time to try to keep us on track today. So the commercial proposals that we're going to look at today, we're going to start by revisiting the discussion that we had at our last our last meeting for C402.6.2.3. This was the issue raised by Tim, and both Tim and Brad provided revised code language for the board to consider. So we'll look at both of those proposals together, and we'll discuss it as a board, and we'll decide on the direction we want to move. After we resolve that, we'll move on to section C410, which is the EV solar electric ready provisions in the code. For one of the proposals, I just wanted to know we won't be doing a straw poll. That is more of an administrative fix that we think makes sense, but we'll show you guys what that looks like anyway. And then we've got 2 proposals in that section that we'll vote on. And then just to name, you all likely saw in the proposal document a proposal from Tim for section C503, and that has been withdrawn. So we won't be discussing that proposal today. Okay, so that's where we're headed for the commercial section. And so Tim and Brad, I'm gonna pass it to you. Tim, I'll let you go first. And do I see Brad?
Okay, I guess I'm up. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Tim.
Good morning, everybody. We had this discussion, let me see here, of when or what we need to be doing or when we need to do it for how the inspections for the air barrier or the exterior air barrier needs to be completed. And my suggestion would be what's in red is that we would require the third-party air leakage agency providing a letter at the time of the permit plan review, so we get that in the system and approved and ready to go when we issue the permit. Jurisdiction issues the permit. In regards to the inspection sequencing, there was some discussion back and forth that I posed from an enforceability standpoint with the larger buildings that have a lot of partial inspections in terms of when framing inspections and insulation inspections are completed. And so this proposed language is really no different than what I usually do or a jurisdiction usually does with getting approved third-party inspections and inspection sequencing before we go out of the gate and issue the permit, or sometimes as a deferred submittal once a contractor gets their permit and then gets third-party inspection companies on board, say for code required stuff like the masonry and foundation. So this is kind of the background for why I would suggest this timing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And Brad, I just saw you join. Great timing. You are already on deck, so hopefully you're ready. And we're just going to go through your proposal, and then we'll jump into the discussion. Kevin, first, did you have a question?
Let's let Brad go for his first. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Brad, over to you.
Yeah, sorry, everybody. Zoom was not cooperating for updating. Does that every once in a while, so it takes a couple minutes. So I initiated a proposal within a separate section, this 107.2.2, just due to the fact that we heard from Anna that this 402.6.2.3 may not entirely apply to all buildings air leakage testing. I also kind of aligned it with 107.2.2 at the suggestion of Tim last time. He thought that it might sit better in this section. And going back through this section again, I think it was my proposal to make sure that this is in place prior to completion of inspections. Makes sense to sit within this section. So I'd be happy to, still kind of take some suggestions on, this language not being 100% correct. It's kind of thrown together at the last second, but hoping that it accomplishes the same thing. And sorry, I missed the first part and Tim explaining what his thoughts were, but it's kind of the gist of it.
Thank you, Brad. So we'll jump into board questions, discussion, and Kevin, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick, I'd prefer, sorry, Tim, Brad's language, because the architect can't sign that. It's a matter of means and methods, and it's not insurable. So if I could pick either one, I like the intent and all of that, but I'd wordsmith that out or choose Brad's.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Elizabeth, and then Ron.
Yeah, I'll just share that Denver's recently instituted a really similar policy. They do require 2 documents to be submitted at permit. One is an actual air barrier review that's performed by a third party, and Denver has specific qualifications to that. And then the second is a letter that rings very similarly to Brad's suggestion here. And then that's signed by the third party, not by the architect. So I think Kevin made a great point there. I do like Tim's suggestion that the scope is outlined. I think that could be really helpful for the contractor, knowing when things have to happen. I know just enough about this to be dangerous, but we do have this service at our company. So things that I'm learning about from the folks who do that is that the timing coordinating with the contractor in construction is really important. So I think some of Tim's suggestions here about the sequencing could be valuable to just achieving success with air leakage. Thanks.
Yeah, Ron, jump in.
So I like the idea that Tim puts forth of having an architect that a letter that's coming from the testing contractor. And when I've dealt with this, I have wanted the person or the company doing the testing to be telling me what they're going to be doing and confirming that they're on the project. And then the signatures by the building official or the building owners, architects, and so forth, those I think of as just acknowledgement that they understand what the plan is, not that they're taking any responsibility for the work that's going to take place, but just that it sort of demonstrates a level of coordination, that everybody knows what's supposed to happen, and what they've told us on the permit documents is going to happen. But it doesn't actually confer any responsibility to the architect that they're anything other than just acknowledging that they received that letter and they know that's what the plan is.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I'd be completely open for getting this requirement into the other section as Brad suggested in some of the chat comment. That appears that would be the appropriate section to get this in, and then possibly morph the two together and see what that looks like, from the beginning and before completion of final framing inspections. And I'd be open for that. Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, just quickly in response to Ron's comment, we've seen versions of that where we acknowledge it. The thing that usually happens is this third party that's almost never under the architect's contract. So we can't speak to anything that they are doing other than acknowledging that this is you could make it a requirement for submittal, that it's something else that the contractor and ownership team need to put in. So there's ways around it for sure.
Okay. Is anyone brave enough to consider, and let me just move these two onto the same slide so we could see them together, how this could look. It sounds like, Tim, you would be okay keeping it within this section. So I'll just highlight that yellow just to make sure that I'm kind of keeping that straight. But it sounds like there was interest in taking some of the language from Tim and moving it into that recommendation from Brad. So any board members feeling brave to try to think about how we combine those? And I'll let you guys look at it for a second.
If I could just suggest that we don't do that on the fly here, and
Okay.
that we could, I'd be happy to maybe, if that's okay, to work with Brad, or just do it. I can just do it, submit it, and then you could send it around. We can table it and bring it back the next time just to make sure.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that kind of
Okay.
through you guys, Kim.
Okay.
And just sending in some stuff, and maybe we can kind of have a little back and forth in development of this. But yeah, I think Tim's right. I'd like to spend 5 minutes on this, and I don't know that that's 5 minutes right now is in the best interest of the board. I'm sure we got other stuff to move on to. So
I think if we
Okay.
change this through the CEO, we're okay to work on it that way, and I'd be happy to look at the language that's provided. But again, I don't want to suggest it from the dais, as Hope always says.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Tim, Kevin, and Brad. I appreciate you guys' willingness to jump in. So we'll table this for now and kind of send you guys these different versions to think through, and we'll help coordinate that updated code language. And we'll come back. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Alrighty. So the next commercial proposal that we had came from Carolyn, and Carolyn, I happy to pass it over to you. I think the one thing I wanted to note is Carolyn's proposing to revise the reference to Group R occupancies in section C410, and it shows up twice, and I'll show you the code language here on the next slide. And the proposal was to reference Group R2, 3, and 4 rather than all Group R occupancies. And in reviewing this proposal, Adam and I thought that this is more of an administrative fix and is definitely the correct way of referencing the R occupancies in these sections. So we weren't going to vote on this unless there are any strong objections. But Carolyn, I'm happy to pass it over to you to share any more detail related to.
I'll just go with what Kim said.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. So here's this language, and I'll just give you guys a moment to look at it. I know you all hopefully have seen it in your in the board proposal document, but happy to answer any questions or have any brief discussion on this. Tim?
Yeah, just for clarification, probably from Carolyn. So if the proposal is to delete the group R and just go with R2, R3, R4, is that what's on the table right now for discussion?
Unmuted. Yeah, correct. I think it's consistent with what we intended.
Thank you.
And
So
just as one more, just quick point of background too, is just this is also aligning with the way the IECC addresses group R occupancy. So like the residential section does R2, R3, R4, 3 stories or less. Commercial does R2, R3, R4, 4 stories and greater. So that's where the alignment here is trying to meet.
okay, perfect. So an R1 then would just go under the other component.
It would still be under commercial. It would just be.
Okay. No, thank you. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Awesome. So any other questions on this? If not, I think, like I said, we may just skip the straw poll because this is just an alignment issue that Carolyn was able to catch. Okay. I'm not seeing any. Wonderful.
For
Well,
clarity, I should credit public comment on this one.
oh, thanks, Carolyn. And thank you to the member of the public who commented. Okay, so with that, then we will move on to Carolyn's next proposal. So Carolyn, I'll pass it over to you, and your code language is on the next slide. So let me know when you want me to navigate. And Carolyn, you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm refreshed. I'm having trouble unmuting. I like Brad. I had to switch to like a mobile device because I was having problems with my computer Zoom today. So apologies. And can you go to the next one just to reconnect? Thank you. So we received some public comment that I raised, which is, specifically noting that we may not think about electric equipment and clothes drying equipment as comparable thermal loads, but and so what I've proposed here is to just break them out as the dedicated circuit, since there's a standardized industry standard for the circuitry for that type of equipment. If you'll recall, when we went through the electric ready provisions in our previous round together, we were acknowledging that for space and water heating, it's important to do the thermal load calculation and appropriately size that equipment. I think this is not as concerning in the case of cooking and clothes drying equipment. And so for consistency of language, we did receive this as a public comment. I thought I would make this proposal. Happy to answer some questions about it though. So it maintains what we had before around thermal load language for the space and water heating, but then just specifies dedicated circuitry for future electric equipment replacing gas cooking and clothes drying equipment.
Thanks, Carolyn. And I just want to note for board members, so this shows up in 2 different sections of C410. So those 2 sections are C410.3.2.1.1 and C410.3.2.2.1. So this would be a change made to both sections. Any board comments, questions, thoughts? John?
Yeah, I'm just not sure if that's for the clothes drying in a commercial space. Is that going to be sufficient for commercial clothes drying, like large equipment? I think this would work in a residential setting, but I'm just concerned about this being in the C code.
Thanks, John. Any, do any board members have thoughts or around that? Brad?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we could maybe just revise it to a minimum 30 amp circuit. And then the 50 amp circuit for electric cooking, well, I guess commercial could require, but I thought for typical residential, it was smaller. They would typically do like a 40 amp circuit. So maybe I'd be open to other people's thoughts on introducing the word minimum in there on circuit sizing.
And I'd be also fine even taking out the specificity of the voltage and amperage and just saying a dedicated circuit appropriate for the commercial grade replacement. I think the only thing we were trying to move away from is this reference to heating capacity.
That feels like a good
particular
amendment to
case.
me.
Yep.
Yeah, to be less specific than code. It's just, that always has unintended consequences you find out about later.
Okay, thanks all. So it sounds like potential revision to change, to remove the specificity of the voltage and amperage out of this. John, oh, Brad, sorry, I didn't see your hand was raised. Jump in.
But that's a lingering hand, sorry.
Oh, okay. John, do you think that that would address your concern here?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
it would. Yeah, that was my only concern. I operate a jail and I'm used to seeing large equipment like this, and I just didn't want to get too specific. Thanks.
Thanks, John. So just to clarify, and Zach, I think as our resident electrician, feel free to jump in if you've got any thoughts on this as well. Do we think that this language is enough, or do we want to add language that says something around it needs to serve the commercial cooking? Or Carolyn, you had a couple extra words that you were saying when you had suggested the edit, so I want to make sure I'm capturing it correctly.
Yeah, I'm okay with the simple. I mean, I think if we want to just make it clear, I think this is fine.
Well, I guess I would just jump in and say I think the words that are on the screen right now don't say anything about the sizing. So I don't think that what's currently on the screen changes anything. It's basically reiterating 1.3. So you need to say something about the sizing if you're going to say something else in that section.
Should we say like,
yeah,
with appropriate circuit sizing for the replacement application, something like that? Again, we're not looking for somebody to calculate a thermal load is what I'm really getting at, right? The other one says that you have to demonstrate what the heating capacity is, as opposed to simply saying, here's the dedicated circuit for this type of equipment.
Let me jump to James. Did you have a thought to offer?
Yes, I think it should say it should be more details in what it has right now. Because somebody could just install a hot plate as a electric cooking equipment. So, I mean, that's just a 20 amp circuit, which is usually not sustainable for commercial property. So I would say minimum NEC code standards or for cooking equipment, and also minimum codes, NEC code standards for clothes dryers.
Okay. I'm again wondering if this is one of those we should take offline rather than trying to figure out here live, just because I don't want to misconstrue. So I think that was just, we got a couple notes here. So it was NEC.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the point here is to make sure that we're getting a comparable appliance to what was initially installed.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I see the goal here That's sort of the goal of the original language we had, where it said to serve a comparable capacity to meet, well, we said the heating load approach should probably be the equipment load instead. But I remember that we intentionally left that vague to leave it open to the professional to size appropriately. Are we hearing a need that needs to be made more specific? Like, is that not enough to just count on our design professionals to do that?
I think the issue, Elizabeth, was just that I think you might have actually just solved the problem, at least in my mind. You changed the word heating to equipment load. That might be sufficient, because I think Carolyn's concern was that you're not calculating a heating load for a piece of cooking equipment or for a clothes dryer, right? And so I think,
Okay.
I wonder, like, Carolyn, do you feel like saying equipment load instead of heating load solves your concern?
I'm good with that too.
Okay.
That might be simple and elegant.
Got it. That makes sense. That works. That helps a lot.
Okay. I made that change, so I ask you guys to just look at that and see what you think. Tim, I'll go to you while folks are looking.
Yeah, thanks. I've been enforcing this for a little better than a year, and I haven't had that question come up, but I would agree with just that. The latest change is to change it to the equipment, because I have had some questions of what that means with the heating load. So I think that the equipment, adding that clarification would help out a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. James, does that seem like that change matches what you would have recommended or suggested here?
Yes, ma'am. That adds a little bit of clarity to it.
Okay, thank you. And Zach, would love your thoughts on this as well.
I was just going to say almost the same thing. And Adam, I think when you put the equipment load, and then when I saw the notes with the NEC standards, that takes care of a lot of it.
Zach, do you think it's worth adding any language in here in reference to the NEC standard? These were just my notes to make sure I was capturing folks' thoughts.
Okay, well, if I would actually put those notes in there, because when you just say the equipment load, or if we were just going to put the heat or the thermal, it puts all of the onus onto that individual and not onto any of the other things that are truly applicable to installing that piece of equipment.
Well, I wonder if you just add the words like in accordance with the National Electrical Code or something to that effect.
I think that's good too, Adam. And I think, James, you probably concur with that. James is also an electrician, so.
Yes, sir. I'm in agreement.
Okay. Awesome. Any other, I'll delete these notes since I think we've captured them. Any other thoughts, comments, concerns here? Okay. I'm not seeing any. So with that, again, as a reminder, this change shows up in two sections. So rather than retype this again, I'm just going to, it was the same exact edit between these two sections, C410.3.2.1.1 and C410.3.2.2.1. So if the board is in agreement, we'll make this change in both sections. And for the straw poll, I will just say, well, think we can keep this question as is, and we will just be referencing the change that we made together in this meeting. So that sounds good to everybody. I'm going to go ahead and post the vote. So does the board want to amend section C410.3.2.1.1 and C410.3.2.2.1 as proposed? I will say maybe as well, yeah, as proposed. Adam, is that okay with that language? I just want to make sure we're okay. Great. So vote yay for option A is yes, vote B is no, and C is abstain. So board members in favor of option A, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 16. Oh, that's 17. I think I saw 18 at one point. Can everyone raise their hand again if you are voting for option A? Okay, 18 hands for option A. Thank you guys. You can lower your hands. If board members would like to vote for option B, no, please raise your hand. Okay, 0 votes for option B. And if any board members would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, 0 abstains. Wonderful. So that proposal passes, and thank you all for your work on getting that dialed in correctly. Okay, we will now move to Tim's proposal for C for 10.5, which is for the commercial EV ready sections. And I'm just going to get my PowerPoint back up. And it's going to give me a hard time, but Tim, I will pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Your
So
code
what I'm
language
propo-
is if you need me to move.
Am I ready?
Yeah, sorry, just your code language. Let me know when you need me to navigate to your code language.
Yeah, if you could, please, the code language. Yeah. And there's 2 sections I'm proposing to add this exception in for, I guess it's EV capable light and EV capable. And it's the same language that the board approved my proposal to put in for the electric ready section. And it is to give a little bit of the opportunity, I should say, for a design team to not have to bring all the conduits over to where the existing or the new service is going to be and meet the sizing criteria for that. And this would just be able to do a termination location at a point where a future transformer, future electrical panel would be able to be put in. And this is specifically just for capable light and EV capable. And I think there's precedence from what we did with electric ready. And it's really a big deal on these parking lots. I've got two real short examples that I'm working on. I've got a very large new commercial project going in up on the north side of Broomfield, and it has a little over 1,000 parking spaces. It's actually split up among 4 parking lots, but the how many EV capable spaces that are required based on the table would be 230. And so they're going to be, I'm working with them as an alternate method in design, since it's not in the code, to allow them to take all those conduits over to a spot where United Power could be putting in their separate transformers. Another example would be a large apartment project that have already approved this alternate, and it has 500 total spaces, so it's an R2, and so that would require 202 EV capable and EV capable lights. So I think it's really in line with the intent of what the code is looking for. And on both of those projects, I've run that concept by Adam because I'm already enforcing that and a proven alternate. So I would just suggest that this would be a good change to put in both of these sections as both of these exceptions to both of these sections. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Let's go to board questions, comments, and discussion. Any thoughts from the board?
Vote.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any hands. So that must be a good thing, Tim, I think. If there are no thoughts or comments or questions from the board, we can move right to the straw poll. Okay, awesome. With that, we will.
Sorry, Kim, could I
Yeah.
ask a quick, this is actually a current thing for us on a project in Boulder, so it's a question for Carolyn. Is there anything in this that, and I wanted to go back and look at that language again, sorry, that's that creates a different circuiting condition for EV capable light capable. I don't think there is. We've come across like an unintended consequence in Boulder that the requirements for the capable spaces is more stringent than actually what's like when they're installed. And I just want to make sure we weren't recreating that language, but this is Carolyn, have you
I mean, I
come
agree
across
with-
that one?
Yeah, I am not familiar with the project in specific, but I think, you know, we can certainly, well, first off, on the project in Boulder, I would just recommend having that conversation with the code team, because I think, you know, we would be consistent with the intent rather than an unintended situation. I support what Tim has presented here as creating some flexibility. So I don't have a concern with what he's presented here.
I'm in favor of that too. Thanks. So, sorry, it's stopped me in my tracks. It was like a conversation from yesterday. That's it.
Oh, good. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Carolyn. Okay. Well, with that, I think we can move to the straw poll. So does the board want to amend section C410.5.2.2 and C410.5.2.3 as proposed? Board members in favor of this proposal voting for option A, please raise your hand. Okay. Thanks, guys. Okay, I think I saw 18 hands at one point for option A. Cool. Any board members who would like to not approve this proposal voting for option B, please raise your hand. Okay. No votes for option B. Any board members that would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, I see no abstentions. Wonderful. So this proposal passes. Thank you, Tim. And with that, we are through the commercial proposals. Tim, did you want to share for a moment why you withdrew your C503 proposal?
You read my mind, Kim. Thank you very much. The proposal that I had on the table for C503.6, which was under alterations, and I'm going to bring this up on the previously approved issue and alterations on the residential later, probably won't be today, next week. As I went through the change, I realized, at least in my opinion, that modifying the IECC language that references back to this definition of substantial improvements, we had a lot of discussion about that. And I think the board was pretty in agreement that seems like a strange definition to do it on market value in most cases. And in my opinion, that would be strengthening the IECC because you are capturing more residential or commercial. I'll say the same thing when we get to the residential part. And we're not able to do that by legislation. I know the other ways we've been doing, bringing in a couple of the appendices, the stretch code and other one, RG, whatever they are, is a way to do that by strengthening. So that's the reason I'm withdrawing this comment or the proposal, and I'll be proposing to do the same thing to kind of go backwards when we get to residential. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you sharing that. And for board members wondering what his proposal was, it is still in the board proposal document, so you can check out the language there. Okay, so with that, we're going to move into our discussion on home size. There were 5 proposals submitted around home size. And so I'm just gonna, and I've got a couple quick intro slides before we jump into the discussion and sharing the proposals. So we had 4 related to the large home size proposal. And then we had 1 submitted in regards to the discussion we had at our last meeting around additional requirements for extra large homes. So before I jump into those, I just wanted to quickly remind the board where we've come from with this home size discussion. As you all, those who were there may recall, it took us a good 4 meetings to, sorry, my timers for the different discussions, to get to where we are today. And so just wanted to go through those very quickly and remind the board what was voted on. in previous meetings and kind of tee up the conversation a bit today. So way back in meeting 14, we asked the board if you all wanted to pursue different requirements based on home size in addition to those in the board, in those in the code. And the answer was the majority vote was yes. In addition, we asked the board if they wanted to add a home size threshold to R406, the one section where it was missing, and we also got a majority vote on that. And then when it came to defining the square footage threshold, the board had a bit of a flip-flop on how we wanted to, like the metric we wanted to use to define square foot. So in meeting 14, we had a discussion and a vote on using conditioned floor area as what would be covered in the square footage requirements. And then in meeting 17, we sort of flipped that vote and decided that it should be living space above grade plane, and that was the majority. So those two votes happened between two different meetings. And then in meeting 18, where we kind of wrapped up most of this discussion, we asked the board, at the time there was a medium home size threshold in there. We voted to remove that. The board voted to use Appendix RG to strengthen large homes, the requirements for large homes rather than RC. And then we voted through a couple different polls to narrow down to the right square footage, that the square footage threshold for large homes should be 3,500 square feet. And again, that is using this living space above grade plane metric that was decided on in meeting 17. So hopefully all of that is not new, and you all remember a bit of that. So for today's discussion, if you propose a change, I just ask that you all really specifically hone in on the metric that you want to use. So is it conditioned floor area? Is it living space? Is it living space above grade plane? And the square footage threshold that you are proposing. If as much as possible, if you guys can focus your explanation and the subsequent discussion on why we should change from the previous board decision, that would be great. And then ideally, let's keep the discussion within the bounds of what's being proposed as a change. Just learning lessons from our last 4 discussions on this. This is a big wormhole we can get easily sucked into. So trying to make sure we're staying focused here to be able to get through the conversation. So for all of the board members here today, whether you propose something or not, please think about the square footage threshold you would like to apply in all scenarios. So let's say your ideal metric, which might be conditioned floor area or living space above grade plane, does not get chosen. What do you think the home size threshold should be depending on the metric chosen? Just sort of be noodling on that throughout the conversation. And then please try to pay attention to the discussion time, because we, as always, are short on time. We are going to really try to keep focused and end the discussion within the bounds of the time limits that we've set. Always try to keep your comments brief. And if we don't get consensus, we won't make any changes. But so with that, just to tee everything up for you guys, Adam, please jump in.
I was just going to note here, I think I'm sorry, on the slide you were just on, actually.
Oh, this one.
Sorry, I didn't catch this one reviewing, but I just wanted to note for proposal 4, Kim's proposal is conditioned living space, not living space above grade plane. We didn't catch that typo in there. Sorry, Kim.
Oh,
correct. Thank you. I was just noticing that myself.
Thanks, guys. I will make that change right now. Okay. So we're going to go through these proposals one at a time. And I was going to say I might do it if, okay, just cut this. Oh, man. My computer today is moving slow. So we'll go through these one at a time. We'll give every board member a minute to share their proposal. And then what we will do is, rather than vote on each individual proposal, we've come up with a number of sort of questions that we'll get to, like what metric do we want? What's the square footage threshold? So kind of pulling out the detail from all of these various proposals, and we'll walk through those together as a group after the board members share their proposals. So starting with Carolyn, and then we'll go Adam. I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. And I'm back on my computer, so yay. So thanks. I'll just start by saying, we heard a lot of comments in public hearing, and it was also inherent in our discussion around the complexities of this triggering additional requirements threshold. right? So when we cross the threshold where the outcome is that we're prescribing additional efficiency requirements on the home that's being constructed. And I agree with the concept that where a home it represents a disproportionate use of energy, it's appropriate for us to apply more stringent requirements. But that just I use the term disproportionate purposefully because I think our base code needs to capture the 90 to 95% of everything built, be appropriately stringent for most homes built, and then set additional requirements to address the disproportionate nature of larger homes or larger energy consumption. We went through our discussion and noodled back and forth on condition area versus above grade plane. We certainly understand the complexities of what happens when you do or don't include a basement area. So I'm advocating that we return back to what's in the current IECC, what we've been using in Boulder for over 7 years now, is the condition floor area. I think it needs to be upped to 5,000 because as we look at like spec homes and the breadth of spec homes across the state, once you add in the basement space, they're going to be just shy of that 5,000 mark. And I think if we drop it down, we're going to start to bifurcate spec home construction, which I think is problematic as we've heard from our builder community. And then I am adding this additional provision of what some of those potential triggers are that are causing disproportionate use. And so these are some of the luxury items that we've discussed in previous conversations, pools, spas, etc., and saying that if those are present, we can also apply those additional requirements. So again, I'm proposing we revert back to what's in the base IECC code as the triggering point for the additional efficiency requirements. I think we've set very solid requirements for our base code. They're very stringent already. And then let's just really focus on the triggers. And then I'll just say I will also be supporting the very large home proposal that's later in this because I do think that there's this next standard deviation. And I will also just say I lean on my math background on standard deviations and all of that. And I do think when we're talking about a bell curve of homes, like we should very solidly have a base code that covers the breadth of those. So I will stop with that. And I see lots of hands.
Thanks, Carolyn. And I want to offer one point of clarification. And then for Kristen and Tim, I'm going to hold discussion and questions until we go through all of the proposals, if that's okay, but feel free to keep your hands up. Carolyn, I just wanted to clarify in the base 2024 IECC, I believe the metric that is in there is living space above grade plane. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Just wanted to offer that for the board.
Yeah, thank you. But I am saying condition space.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Carolyn. Adam, you're up next. Or Will, whichever one. I'm not sure who's speaking today.
I'm happy to speak, Will, unless you have specific thoughts you want to offer. All right.
There you go.
All right. So I think a lot of the reasoning was very similar behind the CEO's proposal on this one as Carolyn's. I think we heard very consistently in public comment from many commenters. I will note that it was not all commenters, but from many commenters, that it is important when considering floor area that we're considering all the area that can use energy. And conditioned floor area is the area that uses energy, whether it's above grade or below grade does not determine whether or not that area uses energy. I think we proposed 4,000 square feet, largely due to a comment that was submitted by a public commenter, which noted that based on the database that they were using for home size, that approximately 7% of Colorado's homes are 4,000 square feet or larger. And to Carolyn's point about being within that 90 to 95% range on that standard deviation note, we felt that 4,000 square feet fit right in that, given that that 7% number would mean that 93% of homes in Colorado are smaller than that. And so that was where the 4,000 square foot number came from, noting that I think we could be amenable to other sizes, but that's just where our proposed number of 4,000 came from. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And then we'll go to Andrew next to share your proposal.
some of the additional proposals take us backwards based upon our own data. If the intent is to cover 95% of all homes or production homes as being within the within the medium classification. Upon my own review of our own data, I proposed an amount that I think that is consistent with that, being what I would say as the largest or one of the two largest builders in the state. And I so much disagree with what's been proposed is would capture 20% or more of our homes within the proposed definitions. And I am so against that as being even proposed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I just wanted to name, Carolyn, there's a question for you in the chat from Kristen clarifying your proposal. Awesome, thank you, Andrew. And then Kim Wheels, I will go to you for your large home proposal.
Also noting that the same typo from Kim's proposal is on this slide as well, so just wanted to flag that. Sorry, I'm not sure how we missed that in 3 places, but
We did either. Kim, I'll fix that as you're speaking. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. I guess from the start, just given, oh, the chair I'm sitting on just broke. Okay, I am going to stand up. Sorry about that. Just from the start, I believe that conditioned space is what uses energy, and that's the metric that we should be using. We've had a lot of discussions about how large basements can be. I know in my area, we have HERS rating requirements or ERA rating requirements for homes 3,500 square feet and above. I chose to just keep my proposal simple to change the definition of the area the definition versus the square footage area, since I knew we would have quite a bit of discussion about the square footage. So I'll keep my explanation simple. I think everybody else has spoken it pretty well, but we have quite a few homes that are built into hillsides and have 4 or 5 living area levels. And so even trying to define what's above grade plane is challenging for those homes. So, and I will add too that in my region, when we have a Colorado Energy Office grant for an energy code upgrade, and unanimous support across our task force was to change from what the ECB had previously voted on and use all conditioned living area as the definition in our regional code. So thank you much.
Thank you, Kim. And if you wanted to just stay unmuted, we wanted to share the extra large home size proposal as well. So just a note for the board, the previous 4 proposals were on large homes. This one is for related to the discussion we had at our last meeting for extra large homes. And when we get to the discussion, we will parse these out, but just wanted to share all the proposals in one go. So Kim, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you. I'm glad you're getting me before I have to go load on a plane too. It's appreciated. Yes, this was just an attempt to incorporate the feedback from our previous meeting last week. That seemed like the board was in a good amount of agreement that addressing extra large homes through the use of Appendix CL would be the RC would be the most appropriate way. And so actually Adam crafted up language from the CEO to help address, and then we can discuss that. Yes, with 2 different options. And I see benefits to both options for jurisdictions who do not have large homes. It could be much easier to just have a referral of, hey, if you meet this size criteria, then go to this appendix. Whereas for jurisdictions like mine that have a lot of homes and a large percentage of them that are over 7,000 square feet, then incorporating it into the code so that it's all in one place would be a benefit. So I can't say that I'm have preference for one or the other necessarily, but I think both options incorporate the intent of addressing extra large homes.
Okay, thank you, Kim.
Yeah, does that explain sufficiently, hopefully?
Yeah, and once we dive into discussion, I'll let others, if Adam wants to jump in, I'm happy to get there when we have the discussion. Carolyn, is a quick clarifying question, because otherwise I'm gonna hold the hand.
Yeah, I just was gonna answer the questions in the chat for the public benefit.
Oh, sure, thank you.
So Kristen and I were having some discussion about clarity around what I'm proposing, and I am open to including anything we collectively identify as the permanent items that are causing disproportionate energy use, which could be, pools, permanent hot tubs, spas, saunas, snow melt systems. And so that was what I was advocating. I think I'm open to our collective team identifying all of the types of additional energy consuming, like we could include outdoor kitchens or other things if we so want. But the things I wanted to get us more specific into the things that are triggering the disproportionate use rather than simply the square footage, because it's less about the square footage and more about what you're putting in this square footage, especially at some of these threshold levels. So that's what I just wanted to clarify.
Awesome, thank you, Carolyn. Okay, so the way that we're going to roll through the next section of the meeting is similar to how we've been doing it with other proposals. We have 6 discussion questions that sort of get at the different elements of these proposals that we'll go through one at a time. Our goal will be around 7 minutes for the discussion, board member Q&A, and then about 1 minute for the straw poll. We're going to try to keep you all on track with this discussion in this time limit. So I ask you very kindly to keep your comments brief as we go through these discussion questions. So these are the 6 questions. We're going to start with just sort of checking off some of these boxes. So we'll start asking first about Carolyn's proposal. Do we want to homes with pools, spas, snow melt, or other amenity loads to comply with the large home requirements? Then we'll move to question 2, which is what metric do we want to use to define the square footage that's covered? Question 3 is what should the square footage threshold be for a large home? So those 3 will kind of cover our existing large home requirements in the code. Question 4 moves to, do we want to add an extra large home size threshold? And if the board votes yes on question 4, we would move to question 5 and 6, which is what should that threshold be, and what code language approach do we want to take? So that's where we're headed. We're going to start with question 1. So again, we'll do about 7 minutes of discussion, and then we'll do a straw poll on this question before we move on. So feel free to raise your hand if you want to jump in. And Tim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. For clarification on question 1, that would come into play or be a requirement for any size home. So that's a kind of a separate trigger. And it has nothing to do with the size of the pool or spa. I know that Kim just mentioned a term hot tub, but that's not listed. A spa is not a hot tub when you look at the pool code. But in any case, what I'm struggling with is if you had a small home, maybe 1,500 square foot, and someone wanted to put in with their new permit a spa or a hot tub, then you'd kick it over to the very restrictive requirements. I'm not going to vote for that. I think that's overly restrictive. Now, big pools, we get on these large houses, which we don't see a lot of, but we get some in the snow melt. I'm not that familiar with just the energy usage. So that would be my comments and question just for that. I would not be voting just without having some kind of levels of sizes or some sort. And then I think that would get extremely complicated in code language.
Yeah, if I could clarify a point, Tim, what it would be triggering is the additional efficiency point requirement. Is what I
understood, but I mean,
propose. Yeah, so not necessarily the more stringent I just wanted to clarify, not the RC, but just the additional efficiency point requirements to offset.
Yeah, okay, I understand, but it would still, without clarifying any type of a size, small or big. And then the other part I didn't bring up is retro permits, or not retro permits, alteration permits, where a builder would come in afterwards, or a homeowner buys the home and then pulls the permit. They got their CO and pulls the permit for the hot tub or putting a pool in, but that's a different discussion because they would go into a different section. So if the board's concerned about that type of energy usage with new homes, then the board should be interested in dealing with alteration permits. So they go hand in hand, because we do a lot more permits after the fact for pools, spas, than we do with new builds. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Jess?
Thanks. I think I just wanted to clarify, because the code language, the proposed code language says permanent spa. So I just wanted to clarify that these are not packaged hot tubs. These are spas, which I would also call a hot tub, but that are, you know, like whatever they're made out of, cement enclosures installed somewhere. You can't just, you know, remove it. It is a permanent fixture.
Correct. That was my intent. Yes.
Thanks, Jess. Kristen?
Hi. So as someone who lives in the coldest part of the state, and has sat on the board of an electric utility, where I can directly see the result, in terms of electricity consumption, I wanted to add some color to people who might be wondering, how important this is. These supplemental loads, are pretty huge, especially in our cold, mountain towns that get big influxes on the weekends. You know, hot tubs alone, especially on the really cold nights, can really drive peak loads through the roof. The snowmelt, systems, not just the ones installed in driveways for the luxury homes, but also when you have an enormous roof and you have someone who has not complied with code provisions requiring that those systems be on timers. That is a huge expense, often an expense that, you know, those huge luxury second homeowners can afford. For them and for the system, it really does drive peak load. So I really support the spirit of what Carolyn has proposed there for those large supplemental systems. Oftentimes we do see those types of, additional loads really driving electricity consumption and peak. And to reiterate the importance of those peak loads, that's really what drives cost and makes it more difficult to manage a distribution system. So I thank you for bringing those to our attention. I do think it, if we have the time, could warrant some additional discussion. I think it would be fairly straightforward to set some parameters around snowmelt system size. So you're not getting necessarily everyone who has a little, you know, snowmelt system in their gutter, but those really, really large systems that are going in. And you know, the hot tubs do draw quite a bit of energy. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Kim?
Hi, yes, I just wanted to bring up that I really support the concept and idea of what Carolyn is bringing forth. A lot of mountain communities have REMP programs, renewable energy mitigation programs, in place to address exterior energy use. And it is based on the actual calculated estimated energy use of these systems. And so I think that having this as part of the requirement related to homes, in the code would conflict and be challenging for those communities with rent programs, which is, from my perspective, a much is a better way to address those specific energy uses for the exterior of the home, versus something that is not, that points or credits aren't directly associated with a calculated energy use that goes into the rent program and then requires either on-site energy mitigation through renewable energy or a fee in lieu of, so that the community itself can offset those emissions through energy efficiency or renewable energy measures. So while I really support the concept behind this, I think it complicates the actual those types of programs that I think are really effective.
Thank you, Kim. Elizabeth, I'll go to you, and then that wraps sort of our 7 minutes discussion. So if anyone has any final thoughts, please throw your hand up. Otherwise, we'll be moving to a straw poll next. Elizabeth, over to you.
Sure. Yeah. Just a question on the snowmelt considerations, just because those can be small loads or obviously very, very large loads. If you'd consider a load threshold for that. Obviously with snowmelt comes some safety considerations, especially where we're trying to prevent icicles from falling on people's heads over front doors and stuff like that. So, a simple system could be as low as, 200 watts or something like that, whereas large systems could obviously get out of hand pretty quickly. Is that something you could consider with this proposal as to like a threshold as to what we consider those large loads?
Yeah, I like that idea of like percent of total or some threshold as a triggering event.
And I don't know much about those systems, so I don't know what that would be, but I know I have a little tiny snowmelt system at my house over a north-facing front door, and it is 200 watts. So that doesn't seem like the sort of thing that would kick me into a large home kind of consideration. So I'm wondering if there is a line there that you all can help define.
Awesome. So I think what we'll do is we'll move to the straw poll, and if the vote here is yes, I think what I will ask is that we take this conversation offline and maybe work with some folks to further define what this should look like. So for now, I'll ask the board, should the large home requirements apply to small homes that install a pool, permanent spa, or permanent snowmelt system? I mean, I could also say or other amenity load, but I think you guys sort of get the intent here. Vote for option A is yes, to include that as a requirement. Vote for option B is no, and option C is abstain. So we'll go ahead and vote. Board members in support of adding this as a requirement, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you all. I see 5 votes yes. You can lower your hands. Board members opposed to this proposal, please raise your hand. Vote for option B. Okay, I have 10 votes for option B. You guys can lower your hands. Thank you. And any board members who would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, and I think that was 5 abstentions. Okay, thank you guys. So this proposal does not pass, but thank you, Carolyn, for bringing it forward. So the next discussion question we want to get at with the board today is what metric do we want to use to define the square footage that is covered under the large home and potentially extra large home requirement? The options on the table are living space above grade plane, which is the way that the 2024 IECC currently defines a large home. Living space, which I think was also sort of the conditioned floor area, but living space as a defined term in the code, or conditioned floor area as a defined term in the code. So we'll queue up the 7 minutes of board discussion, and folks have thoughts, please raise your hand. Tim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick, I just want to clarify. I see the bullet points, but a couple of the proposals that I saw actually look like they were deleting or proposing to delete living and put in conditioned area, or I'm sorry, conditioned space. And I don't think that would be appropriate. And the reason I say that is, then that would end up covering a conditioned attic or a conditioned crawl space. And I've got a couple of production builders that do the conditioned attic with the spray foam all the way up on top, and they are able to do that so that they don't do the attic ventilation. And the same thing with, I don't think I've seen a crawl space that's had natural ventilation in probably 15 years or 20 years. And they're usually throwing a couple of heating runs down in there. So I would be in support of the living space, and I'm in support of, including the basement. But we'll talk about that later. But just to clarify, I would not be in support of saying just changing it to condition space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think Tim just helped clarify what my question was about, sort of that comparison between living space and conditioned floor area, and what conditioned floor area would capture that living space doesn't. Tim, I think you just answered that for me. So that I also wanted just to check on for the code folks, a basement, for example, if it's a warm basement, that's going to count as living space as well as conditioned floor space. Is that correct?
I think it depends on whether it's finished or unfinished, Elizabeth. I don't think an unfinished basement would qualify as living space under the definition, where it would qualify under conditioned floor area.
Yeah, my intent would be to include unfinished basements
In which definition?
in what I'm advocating for as the square footage we use.
So living
And
space.
sorry, does that mean living space would
Well, so
or
I think
would
we need
not?
to get, I think we need to get honed in on what the right language is. I agree with that. I'm just clarifying the intention of my proposal is
Okay.
conditioned living space or floor area inclusive of unfinished basement area.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear in the definition of living space in the IECC that living space would not account for unfinished spaces. It's space within a dwelling unit utilized for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, bathing, washing, and sanitation purposes.
Got it.
that would not
So
include-
then, if the basement is unfinished, it does not count as living space. As soon as it becomes finished, it counts as living space. Is that correct?
And so basically, if it gets past CO with unfinished and then gets finished later, that floor area would not be accounted for in the home size consideration for the code. If you used conditioned floor area, it would be.
Got it. Okay, so we may also want to, and maybe the code already does this, but just to define what is the threshold between finished and not finished? Is it drywall? Is it a furnace that conditions it? If you could help me with that. That may already be here and I'm just not aware of what it is. Thanks.
Kim, could you do me a favor and just pull up the conditioned space? I saw you scroll past it a couple of times. Right there.
I will keep this up, and Ron, I'll pass it to you.
I think maybe we're getting to it. I was just going to point out that we're using these words interchangeably, and it's a little confusing because I don't think they all mean the same thing about conditioned floor area, conditioned space, and occupiable space, and so forth. So I guess I think we're getting there, looking at the definitions themselves, but I think we're in the danger of making things a little muddled by throwing those terms around without being a little more precise about which ones we actually mean.
Yeah, I think I understand conditioned space. I'm not sure I fully understand living space and what would make, say, that basement condition cross from one to the other.
Jesse, I'll go to you next.
I'm sorry, maybe I just add, in Boulder County, we've been working with this idea of conditioned floor area. And so that would include any space that, in the way we use it, to talk about any space that you could use as occupiable space, whether it was unfinished or not. And we were excluding spaces that didn't have sufficient head height to be considered usable space, or things like a conditioned attic was also not included. So if there was no stairs that went up, it was access through a hatchway, regardless of its height, we weren't considering that as part of the conditioned floor area. So we were really trying to get at the portions of the building that were usable, whether they were finished or not finished or unfinished, but they had to meet the other definitions of what we considered, occupiable residential floor area.
Thank you, Ron. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Every single one of my builders, production builders, are almost always providing an unfinished basement. I rarely get a production builder do a finished basement. The customs, typically I get the finished basement. And every single one of those unfinished basements have heating ducts and cooling ducts. They've got the AC. And the mains are there. They're providing a minimal amount of heat down there, at least a couple of registers. And that's typically where the mechanical equipment, a lot of water lines. So whatever language we use, I think the conditioned space definition is not correct out of the IECC, in my opinion, because that could include the crawl space and the conditioned attic space. And I don't think that that's appropriate. And whatever term we use, it needs to be able to capture that basement, below grade area, I guess you'd call it, whether it's finished or not. Thanks.
And those buildings that you're seeing with the basements that aren't finished, I think it's pretty clear that over time those become finished basements and they're used as basements. So I think we want to include those when we talk about the energy consumption of that space, but we want to be careful that we are not including spaces that won't be finished, like the attic spaces and crawl spaces.
Well, and Ron, can I just jump in really quick with a follow-up question on that? Because I think Tim is saying conditioned space is not right. Does conditioned floor area exclude, I just want to clarify that it sounded like what you were saying earlier was that conditioned floor area excludes those spaces that will never be finished, but conditioned space does not.
That's how we've been using in Boulder County. That's how we've been using those terms. And so the floor area counts. We also have a term called residential floor area that we use as part of our planning and zoning code, and that guides much of this discussion for Boulder County. But we are just trying to focus on those spaces for the energy code that we would that is or is likely to be occupiable floor area that is part of the thermal envelope. So again, basements are part of that. Crawl spaces are not. And in fact, we just in our newest code reduced the height of our crawl spaces to make that even clearer, that distinction about what's a crawl space versus what is an unfinished basement.
Thanks, Ron. I'll go to Jesse and then Andrew.
Thanks. And I think as I'm hearing this, maybe I've drawn my own conclusion, but we've talked about attics, crawl spaces, and basements, but are garages outside of the building thermal envelope, and therefore that's why we're not talking about them?
Correct.
I see Ron nodding his head. Okay. And I guess the other question is, if this is an energy code and we're looking at making energy use in the building more efficient, why would we continue to exclude areas that are still using energy? Like, I feel like we're trying to come up with definitions of what we should and shouldn't be doing, but all of these things, including heated garages that we see a lot of with these large homes that we're talking about, still use energy. So how come those are freebies for folks? And so I guess maybe there's some logical reason behind that, but to me, it just seems weird to say, snow melt is excessive, but a heated garage is not excessive.
So in Boulder County, we don't allow just a heated garage without that garage meeting the full requirements of the conditioned building envelope. So we would bring that right in as if it is conditioned space if they're heating the garage. Crawl spaces and attics are sort of semi-conditioned spaces. They're not deliberately conditioned, and we want them because they're actually more energy efficient than the historic process of venting those spaces and then trying to seal them. So we would like conditioned attics because they're actually energy savers and they have a lot of benefits from an ignition resistant construction perspective, because we're not adding all these roof vents that allow embers to come in. So we want to encourage them. They're sort of semi-conditioned spaces. They're not the amount of heat. We see lots of crawl spaces with a heating duct that runs through them, but the ducts are very minimal. They're just designed to provide a little bit of a thermal buffer. They they don't typically sit at the set point of the rest of the house. But again, like a thing like a heated garage, if someone wants to heat a garage in Boulder County, we require that garage to meet the full requirements of the building envelope of the rest of the code.
Yeah, no, and so I guess, thank you for that education. And I would just say that whatever we land on, difference between floor area space, like I think that for those condition areas, including heated garages that are typically considered outside the building thermal envelope, that they are included. Because if we're talking about large homes, the ones that we see are almost always heated here in Breckenridge.
Just to jump in here. So if they are heated, if the garage is heated at a rate of 3.4 BTUs per hour per square foot or greater, they would be required to insulate per the requirements of the thermal envelope. So,
in Boulder County, we would require that if they install any heating system at all. That they have to meet, it's all or nothing. Yeah.
I just want to talk about what's in the 2024.
Sure.
So that is a very low heating rate. So when we talk about on the commercial side, like a plenum above a garage, most of the time will be heated to that level of heating or less. But we do have quite a few plenums above a parking garage that are heated at a higher level than 3.4 BTUs per square foot. So, I think your typical garage that you're talking about, Jesse, might already be included within the thermal envelope to heat it to the level that those homeowners are looking for. Although I am not by any means an expert in residential garage heating. I do not have one.
Why should you be? You keep cars in there.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Jesse. And I'm seeing folks in the chat. I just replied to a couple. In this conversation, I would like board members to focus on the terminology we have available, unless you all want to create a new definition, which I would sort of make an assumption that at this point in the game, that would be a challenging thing to do. So if you all can continue to think about what this looks like, and if we're aligning on one of these terms, that would be great. And then I'll go to Andrew and then I'll go to Tim.
Yes, Andrew, it's very challenging for me to support a change from a above grade plane. The ANSI standards, much of the mortgage industry, the appraisal industry is still premised upon above grade plane. And I don't want to wreak havoc across how raters do stuff that work in multiple markets. You'll make it very challenging. And also, I still don't want to be hoodwinked. And I still feel like I'm being hoodwinked into this being a premise for the next vote, where the board wants to take 25% of our plan offerings and define them as medium, which is just completely inconsistent with all the discussions. I just can't support the change in definition or change in use from anything other than above grade plane.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Tim?
Yeah, my last comment, I think that the living space language is perfectly adequate. With an unfinished basement, it's got heating, and Ron made a good point that in the condition attics and the condition crawl spaces that we have, we typically just see one duct, especially at a crawl space, just to get air in, and then they bring an outside, not outside air, but to take it out for the circulation. And the way I understand manual JDS working, you don't include those spaces for sizing your equipment, and you do not include garages. I've seen some custom homes where they brought a heating duct out from the main house into the garage, and then we require a fire damper because it's it's a pseudo fire rated assembly. So they're usually putting in maybe one or a unit heater, and those are in the big custom homes. I've yet to see on your standard size home any kind of a permanent gas fired appliance. So I think the living space is perfectly adequate, would cover that basement area, finished or unfinished. You get laundry down there. They're being used all the time. kids' playhouses are down there. They're getting used and they're using energy. So I feel the way to keep that.
Thank you, Tim. I'll go Carolyn.
Yeah, so Kim, I don't think we necessarily need to create a new definition. I think if we use conditioned floor area like in the section of the code where we're referencing the trigger, which currently says 3,500 square feet of above plane grade conditioned living space, whatever we say in there right now, it could be conditioned floor area, and we can, if we're concerned about attics or crawl spaces, we can add language that just says does not include attic and crawl space, or space not designated as future living area. That there's ways to qualify it when we reference the trigger as opposed to creating a new definition.
Okay.
Just to jump in again, sorry. I did put in another definition of occupiable space. So an enclosed space intended for human activities, excluding those spaces intended primarily for other purposes, such as storage rooms and equipment rooms that are only intended to be occupied occasionally and for short periods of time. I don't know if that's helpful.
That one was helpful, thank you.
It comes from the IECC too.
It does. Thanks, Kristen.
So I appreciate everybody's comments. So and sort of the drive towards consensus building. What I think I need to hear from board members is if anybody who would like to offer up a different option other than the three here. And if so, I need very clear direction on what that option is, and we will add it as one of the items that we vote on. So maybe I can ask that question, and then I would like to move us to our straw poll. I know that this is a complicated conversation, but I think I'm hearing a lot of the same themes arise, and so I don't know that there's new things to add. So that would be my question to the board. If you want a different option, please propose it now, and we can add it to the straw poll. So Elizabeth, and then Kristen.
Sorry, I'm still not clear on what is the definition of living space. Is it occupiable space? Is it conditioned occupiable space? So is that would exclude garages, storage rooms?
Correct. It's finished.
Closet.
It's
and unfinished basements.
Mm-hmm. It's finished spaces.
What is finished? So a closet, for example, if I have a big old walk-in closet or a giant storage room or a heated bonus room or something that's not used for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, bathing, washing, or sanitation, does storage count as quote living? I'm still just not clear on this definition.
I think the truth is, Elizabeth, is that these definitions have a little bit of overlapping consideration, because occupiable space talks about storage area, but does storage for your clothing count as storage area? Like, what does storage area mean, right? I think if one were to, at least from my perspective, common sense would say closets, which are used daily, right? And you walk in there and you use it, is a living space. You are using it for living. A storage area in your basement where you store stuff that you go down and pull out twice a year, Christmas decorations, for example, or something like that. That's different than a closet. So I think that I don't know that these definitions are going to answer your question. I guess I don't think we have a complete answer to your question in these definitions, no matter how we frame it.
Okay. I think that if we're to use this definition of living space, we need to have some kind of definition of what is the criteria that crosses an unfinished basement into living space. Is it drywall? Because a lot of people just drywall a basement, use it for a big old playroom or something like that. Like, what is the actual definition that would cross something into that? And that still does not clear to me.
And so Elizabeth, if I can, I think I would love the board, rather than to pick apart the definitions you do not like, really try to figure out which one you feel most comfortable with, and it sounds like living space might not be that for you. So if it's conditioned floor area, I don't know. To Adam's point, the definitions are what they are in the code. So I think what I'm asking the board to do is think about what is the metric you want to support. And let's hone in on that rather than trying to understand.
Yeah, sorry, that's really difficult to do until I know what they are. Like what, and maybe the board can help share what their intent is. Right now, I have no idea.
I mean, I think, Elizabeth, I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at, is I don't think we can fully answer that within the context of this definition, because I think, as we've talked about in previous meetings, any reasonable person can read words and think different things of it, right? Like, so I don't know that any answer that any board member gives is the right answer. The other thing I would like to pose to all of you is remember that there's another public comment period after this. And so if there is a term that, you know, members of the public feel is going to create some unintended consequence, they will have an opportunity to share that as well. So just wanted to remind everyone of that as well.
Can I chime in? I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand at all, so I don't know if I'm interrupting anybody. But I think if we choose a definition that is consistent with what a HERS rater or ERI, you know, a third party expert has to use per requirements for modeling a home, then there's consistency with the square footage that is being modeled and then considered. And since our requirements for these large homes head in that direction of needing a specific score, consistency in that square footage could be really helpful. In my region, in the jurisdictions, we use conditioned, sorry, I can't even look at the screen right now. It's a conditioned floor area that I put into my proposals. And that includes essentially the thermal boundary of the home, which is consistent with resident requirements. Does not include a heated garage or exterior spaces, but within the thermal boundary. And I think, you know, from there, then it's any space that's being heated or cooled. And using energy as a result. But not
Kim.
Not
Kim, you're breaking up, so we can't really understand anything you're saying.
so helpful language. Yes.
Kim, if you don't mind, I think we caught a lot of that. It sort of started to trip up right when you started talking about what your jurisdiction uses. So if you wanted to add any notes in the chat, that'd be awesome, but we can't hear you. And I'll go to Carolyn.
Yeah, to your request, Kim, I would like to formally add conditioned occupiable space.
And maybe, Carolyn, can I propose a conditioned floor area that is occupiable space? Because conditioned occupiable
works.
space is not a defined term. So I'd like to combine two terms.
I can't get to the chat from my phone. I'm sorry.
I'm 100% in support of what Adam just said.
So it was, Kim, it was conditioned floor area that is occupiable space.
Yes.
Okay, give me 1 second. My computer is not allowing me to get out of this. Come on. There it goes. Okay. Apologies. Let me just, oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm going to ask for that one more time. And hopefully my computer will catch up with itself enough to, there we go. One more time, Adam.
Conditioned floor area that is occupiable space, and conditioned floor area is a defined term and occupiable space is a defined term.
Okay. Thank you all.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Before we go, it's just on Mike. Adam, how would that apply to unfinished basements then? Like, as you're suggesting that, does that cover finished basements or not?
To be clear, I'm not suggesting it. Carolyn
Okay.
was, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just suggesting that as rather than combining two terms to make an undefined term that's not defined, let's combine two defined terms. That's all I was saying. But I think occupiable space, it says occupiable space is defined as an enclosed space intended for human activities, excluding those spaces intended primarily for other purposes, such as storage rooms and equipment rooms that are intended only to be occupied occasionally for short periods of time. So I would think an unfinished basement area that is like a large space that could be finished would be considered intended for human activities. That's how I would read it.
That's how I would read it.
Okay. Tim, are you offering up another metric to vote on here?
I just I put my comment into the chat about the occupiable space definition. And I put an example if you had an unfinished basement, you had your mechanical equipment down there, which happens quite often, and you just put in a bunch of racking for storage, and it still has a lot of heating vents, and the manual JDNS includes that area. So we're good. If you use the occupiable space, then that would not be included. I don't think that's really where the board's trying to go for. In my opinion, I think it's going to go in the opposite way. And I know the definitions, there's 3 or 4 definitions we're trying to put together, but the conditioned floor area, I don't think you would call a conditioned attic a floor area in the building code, nor a conditioned crawl space would not be floor area. So conditioned floor area, I think I could go find a code section that would say that's like first, second floor, basement would be the floor area. Thanks.
So I guess maybe to try to resolve this, I wonder if we can go one by one with all 4 of these and try to explain what, at least from my perspective, what each of these options means, so that everyone can understand what the options are on the table. So I think living space above grade plane is living space as the defined term, which is a space that is essentially finished and is meant for living, one of that long list of things: living, cooking, bathing, eating, whatever, all the items were listed there. And then living space, of course, option B is the same thing, just also inclusive of that space, those spaces below grade. Conditioned floor area is any space that is a conditioned space that is floor area. So I think Tim just gave an example of like an attic or a crawl space or something like that would not be considered floor area, but it's a conditioned space that is floor area. And then conditioned floor area that is occupiable space is essentially the same thing as conditioned floor area, but it excludes things that are like mechanical rooms or storage only rooms or things of that nature. Does that help, folks?
And with that, I'm going to draw the line that we need to vote on this and move on. And
You can't yet, Andrew, that if you're going to put conditioned floor area in one spot, you almost have to put it in every spot. And that's a separate question. And if I could restate, what is the purpose of this? Is this solely for the purpose of defining the home size as to a medium and large home and potentially an extra large home? Is that the purpose?
Yes.
That is the purpose.
And I get back to that, this still feels somewhat discriminatory, that if the intent was to really permit 95% of home plans offered to remain as is, I restate that you're going to capture 25% of plans offered based upon the above grade plan, and I don't think that's the intent of any board member. And it's really frustrating to hear that I still feel like the residential home building industry is being hoodwinked. And I can't say it any other way. How else do I say it? That you're going to take 25% of all plan offerings and put them in a different category.
So
I don't even know why we're discussing this.
thank you, Andrew. I see hands up. I am going to cut it off right now. We're going to move forward with a vote. If we do not get a majority of board members voting for one of these 4 options, there will be no change to how we have the current draft one written, which is a living space above grade plane metric. So that is how this is going to work. If you would like to change that metric, please think hard about how you would like to change it. And we will move forward with a vote.
Hey, Kim, a question on that. Given that there are multiple options that are subcategories of each other, I'm not sure that that completely works.
Yeah, Kim, I think what we had discussed is anything. So basically, if we don't get a majority on any, then the two top options will be moved to a vote. That one will be voted on, and that's how it just gets decided.
Okay, thank you, Adam, for clarifying that.
Could we just first vote whether to retain the above grade plane versus modifying it to something that's inclusive of additional space first, and then vote on which definition, if the changing to the broader space is adopted before, so it's less complex than picking all these 5 things?
Carolyn, I would say that if folks want to retain the living space above grade plane, which is one of the options here, I would say rather than having a yes/no vote on that, if you want to keep that, vote for that. Right? I mean, I think that
what I
rather
mean
than
is
breaking it out into 2 votes, I don't understand what the benefit of that is.
No, my issue is like I think there's a diverse, I think the other 3 are problematic or competing with just keeping the above grade plane definition that we have.
Like Tim said, it should be a yes/no vote on the first one first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like a yes/no on the first one first.
We can do that. I just really want to encourage us to try to be expeditious as we move through this. I know sometimes these polls don't work out exactly how you all hope that they do, but the more time we spend here, the less time we will have to get through every other board member's proposal on the code itself. So we will vote first on, does the board want to retain living space above grade plane as the metric? Okay. Yes, no, abstain. Okay. So if board members would like to retain living space above grade plane as the metric, please raise your hand now for a vote yes here. Okay, I see 5 hands raised for yes. You guys can lower your hands. If board members would not like to retain living space above grade plane as the metric, please raise your hand now.
And can you say, give me a yes for including me in this one?
Yes, thanks, Kim. So I see 10 votes for not including that as the metric. Any board members that would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, 5. Okay, 6 abstentions. So the majority, well, hold on. How many board members do we have? Adam, is it 21?
21, and only 5 voted in favor, so regardless, that's fails.
Okay.
Or rather, no
wins.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will move forward, changing the metric away from living space above grade plane. And so I will take that out as the option here. And now we will vote on which definition or metric we want to use to define square footage. So board members in favor of option A, using the defined term living space to measure square footage, please raise your hand. Okay. See 6 hands that were raised for living space. You guys can lower your hands. For conditioned floor area, that is your preferred definition, please raise your hand.
And can you include me here?
Okay, so I've got, raise your hand and keep them up, please.
Kim, did you hear me?
Yes, I got you, Kim. So that's, I see 9 hands plus Kim, so that's 10 for conditioned floor area. You guys can lower your hands. And then for option C, conditioned floor area that is occupiable space, please raise your hand. Okay, so that's 4 votes for option C. So it does seem like we have a majority for conditioned floor area as the defined term that measures square footage.
So we had 19 votes cast, correct? Or was that 20? 20 votes cast, 10 votes in favor of conditioned floor area, correct?
Yep.
So that is not a majority, so we need to move it to 2 options. So
Okay.
the top 2 options are conditioned floor area and living space, if I recall from the votes.
Yes, that is right. Thanks, Adam, for helping me track that. Okay, just making sure I've got my slides all set up here. Okay, so the final vote will be between living space and conditioned floor area. Going to eliminate option C. Apologies. Okay. Revote. These are your 2 options. So board members in favor of living space, please raise your hand. Please raise your hand and keep it up. You guys, I can't track if you raise and lower. Okay, I see 7 votes for option A. And please lower your hands. And then option B, if you'd like to move forward with conditioned floor area, please raise your hand.
Kim, can you include me here?
Yep, I got you, Kim. So that's 13 votes for option B. Okay.
Well, 14 with Kim's.
Sorry,
There
someone.
were 13 hands and then Kim.
Okay, I saw 12 hands plus Kim's, but 14 votes for option B. Either way, that is a majority for conditioned floor area. Okay. I think if it's okay with you all, I may breeze through our break today. Adam, is that okay? I think we just have to keep going. So much to get through. Okay, so our next discussion question is, what should the square footage threshold be for a large home using the metric that we decided, which is, so I'm just going to put that in here, conditioned floor area. The options presented in the proposals were 3,500 square feet, 3,800 square feet, 4,000 square feet, and 5,000 square feet. And so would offer board member comments, discussion on this question, and then we will stop. So Carolyn, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for Andrew. So Andrew, you've made the comment about 25% of the floor plans would be thrown out. Could you provide us some clarity on what you think the threshold is based on the new definition of what would be a typical build range for back home or semi-custom?
This is Andrew. No, Ken, first, thank you for the opportunity. I believe, but I don't know if this is a separate question to the board. What is the intent? 1, 2, I think this is somewhat uncharted. Mixing and matching above grade and below grade. I've not yet seen it, the board post or propose or offer any study as to what is below grade versus upgrade. See, there may be an inference that does above grade in many cases equal the amount below grade. That's a question. I think I've heard people make that assumption. And I don't know if that's a fair assumption. Does the above grade plane space, in many cases for a full basement, always equal the below grade? And if so, there's some inference stacking that I indicated that for many builders, including us, 25% of plan offerings are 2,500 feet or larger. So I must therefore almost rule out any of the choices on here. If it is the intent of the board to say that here it wasn't intended to capture most production home builder offerings, and it was only intended to capture 5 to 10% of their offerings, this is overreaching. And I could get my head around the 3,500 feet above, and even though I thought it captured more than maybe what I thought it should, that was easier as a builder rep to grasp the 3,500 above grade plane. Now that we're above and below, this may have unintended consequences that you're going to affect 25% of all plan offerings by many builders, and I don't think that's the intent of the board. So I don't know what the intent of the board is.
Yeah, Andrew, for clarity, I went out and looked at a bunch of production builds and floor plans and making my recommendation to move to the 5,000. So it'd be great if you could clarify for us, or had any data available
I
to
can
explain
say
that,
with
because your representation doesn't sound right to me.
I can say with specificity that 25% of our, 24% of our plan offerings are 2,500 square feet or higher above grade plane. So it is
Yeah, total square footage, so above plane and unfinished basements. Like, what is that number?
Many of our basements are full basements. So there is an inference that does the above grade plane by definition equal the below grade plane if it's a full basement. I don't know if anybody has any data on that, but I am confident, at least in that, in stating that 24% of our plan offerings are 2,500 feet or larger above grade plane. And if the inference is a full basement by square footage calculation methods that excludes the garage, the above often equals the below. And it would be reasonable for me to make that leap, that do 24% of our plan offerings equal 5,000 square feet or higher. And that's a reasonable inference.
Are 24% of your plans single story? Because if they're two-story, then that full basement would be a lot smaller, right?
True, but I don't have an answer to that. I don't have all the data of our frequency distribution of our basement size. I had, for purposes of the discussion, frequency distribution of the above grade plane. And I may need more time to speak more cognizant of that. This is an area that I didn't personally or professionally want to go because of how builders operate, but now we're going this route. I'd have to do some more homework based upon single story, two-story, but you're correct. It is maybe overly assumptive to say that we're all ranches, and therefore if we're 2,500 or higher above, we're 2,500 or higher below, and that's not true.
Andrew, so I just want to remind you, as well as the board, that this is not the last chance to figure this out. And so, Andrew, if you're thinking that it would be helpful for you to go back and kind of check some of those square footage values for your homes, we will have another opportunity through the draft number 2 public comment period to revisit the square footage threshold. So again, I don't want to rehash the vote that we just did. But just want to remind everybody that there is that opportunity. And so we still welcome that input if you're able to pull those numbers for us, Andrew.
Yeah, Kim, thank you for the reminder. Kellen, thank you for permitting me to speak on that. I don't think I have a clear answer myself on which one to support because I need to go back and revisit this.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. I'll go to Elizabeth next.
Yeah, would the board entertain something that splits this? I think that there's a definite difference in the energy use of, say, a home with 5,000 square feet of conditioned space above grade versus one that has 25 above grade and 25 below grade. Those are very different buildings with different energy use. Would the board entertain splitting that so that if we, perhaps there's a qualification of, just to use the 5,000 number because it's easy to do math. If there's a home with 5,000 square feet of conditioned space or 3,500 conditioned space above grade and less than a certain number below grade, like, could we quantify those things differently potentially to try to represent that below grade space is not as energy impactful as above grade? And that's maybe a question for everyone, because I also struggle with this.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I will let the board noodle on that while I go to our other hands. So Kevin, I'll go to you next.
Quickly, and I need to step up in 5 minutes. So Andrew was asking what the intent of the board is, and I don't think any single person can articulate that. My understanding of the board's intent was that we are trying to capture unfinished basements, because say you take, to Kim's example, or Kristen's example, you have a 3,000 square foot house above grade, 2 stories, a 1,500 foot floor plate. Then you probably have a 1,500 foot basement underneath that. I think what we're trying to do is having somebody nudge right up to that, whatever this threshold is. Say we say it's 4,000, and somebody says, okay, I'm going to build 3,990, so that I don't have to get these extra 10 points of energy credits. And then they have underneath that a 2,000 square foot basement, so the total square footage of the house winds up being 6,000 feet, and they're not subject to a slightly more stringent. I think when we throw around these numbers, whether it's 20 or 24 or 25%, there's an indication or an implication that these houses become inaccessibly unaffordable. And I don't think that's the case. We have a small incremental difference in the amount of credits that need to be realized. So to make, we don't really have the data in front of us to justify what that cost increase would be. And I don't think we have the data in front of us to say what the threshold for the house sizes are. But I want to respond to the, like that's my intent, is that somebody doesn't build a 4,990 square foot house and then have how many square feet of basement underneath it, just gaming the system and trying to stay in the threshold.
Rob, Andrew, Kim, Adam, I think this is a question. It is a question for me. What is the intent? But until that's answered, if I'm picking 4 choices, I'm going to pick D just out of the gate until there's more clarity. That I don't think any of us are going to completely be able to answer this. And 5,000 feet is the current threshold for large homes above grade plane. If 5,000 feet becomes condition space, which is above and below, if that becomes the default for current purpose until we revisit this, that's, and if I'm forced to pick between A, B, C, and D, I'm going to pick D, because I think we need some more thought on this, but it's a placeholder.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. And I also want to remind the board that we shared home size database resources as much as we could pull with the board back when we were in meeting 14 and 18 through 14 through 18. And so after this discussion today, if you want a refresher on all of that, I really highly recommend you all look back at that, looking at that data that we were able to pull to help inform the decision.
Kim,
So
quick question, was all that data above grade plane though, was it not?
each data set we looked at, Andrew, was slightly different. And so we clarified that in the research document we sent. And it, adds to there is just a lot of different ways to look at home size. So I think make sure when you're looking at that document, you're checking the metric that is associated with the square footage values you're looking at, because across the board, they're all very different. So Jess, I'll go to you next.
Thank you. Out of curiosity, does anybody recall the current threshold for home size above which a sprinkler system needs to be installed? This would be single family residential.
In many jurisdictions, my recollection is 5,000 feet. Some jurisdictions may be lower, such as 3,000 feet, but it varies. But I'm reaching out.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was defined in like fire code.
In Boulder County, it's all new homes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Carolyn and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Kevin was describing around the intent here. We heard a lot of public concern about somebody trying to game the construction by building an equally large below grade, which could be finished space that has the equivalent demands of the above grade space by building a larger home, a home as large underneath as above grade plane. And so that was the concern we were trying to address, or I was trying to address by advocating for moving back to the conditioned floor area.
And Caroline,
definition.
I think Elizabeth raised, and I acknowledge this, I think many will acknowledge this, that below grade has very little cooling load, and cooling load is a major expense. I had never thought about till Elizabeth raised, can you have a hybrid above and below? And take these numbers and split them, and what does that do? I don't know how that would operate, but she raised something I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, but we're also setting the standard which would apply to homes in mountain areas that also have very low cooling load, right? So in concept, as you're designing the home, you're going to take into account the total model cooling demands of the home. We're just triggering when you have to earn some incremental efficiency points. And then, as I mentioned, when we were going through this earlier in our discussions, we have the issue of a lot of the data sets blend above and below grade based on finished floor area. And so what I did specifically, and to Andrew's intent, is the intent was to try and capture production builder thresholds, because I think all of the production built homes should have to meet our already stringent base code. And we're really trying to address the fringes of larger than that, or at least the majority of the production builds that are reasonably sized. And I also agree that once you get into those larger ones, I am okay with the affordability hit of a little bit more stringent requirement, because I don't think it's an issue when we're talking about those. So I think that's very much the intent and what I was trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Carolyn. We'll go to Elizabeth.
Yeah, as I'm noodling on this a little bit more about considering above grade separately from below grade, what would the board think about if we have a small formula here that, so, maybe this square footage here is a threshold, but it's calculated by perhaps it's above grade square footage plus, say, 50% of your below grade square footage. I think everyone would agree, well, tell me if you all agree, below grade conditioned floor area will be less energy dense, both on the heating and cooling side. I mean, think about infiltration. Infiltration is one of our biggest loads. There really isn't any for true below grade walls, or at least it's much more minimal. So we're saving on both heating and cooling, even if we have all of the standard interior internal loads. I really like the idea of including that below grade conditioned square footage, but I do think it should have less of an impact on this threshold. And I think that could solve the problem of the 2-story versus or 1-story over a full basement versus 2-story over a full basement. And then I'll throw out one other thing. A lot of the time, the reason we have full basements is partly for structural reasons. And not that we need a basement for structural reasons, but if we already need a crawl space because we have terrible soils and we need a structural floor rather than a slab on grade, it's really economical then for folks to then upgrade that to a basement, thinking about production homes. To optimize efficiency of the construction. So I want to encourage below grade occupiable square footage, because it is a better way to use occupiable square footage than to have everything above grade. And I'd like to encourage that over just, say, adding another floor on the building. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So I guess what I'm hearing, Elizabeth, and I is a change to all of this. So I guess I'm trying to think about how we move forward with asking the board if that's something that they want to revisit. And Adam, if you have any thoughts, please jump in here. Or if you're suggesting, Elizabeth, within this conditioned floor area metric that we've already voted on, if we're adding a fifth option here that is like some equation to figure out the square footage. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't think we're going to go back to changing our vote on conditioned floor area. I think we need to move past that. So I need to figure out how your proposal fits into this question.
Yeah, I think that can fit within the conditioned floor area threshold, but that perhaps this is a threshold rather than a total conditioned floor area. That perhaps this is, and I'll just use the 50% for below grade just because it's a nice round number, that this becomes conditioned floor area above grade plus 50% conditioned floor area below grade. Just to get something on paper.
Thank you. Okay. Thank
And
you.
then just to be clear too, Elizabeth, there still has to be a number associated with that, right? Like if that equation yields more than X number of square feet, then you're triggered, right?
Right.
So you can't really have that as an option in addition to an amount. You have to decide whether or not we're going to do that, and then you have to decide the amount, right? Like, does that make
Yeah,
sense?
so maybe we should
That's a
discuss
separate
that
question.
first. If folks are amenable to that idea, it might find that happy place between all of these numbers and then help us decide.
So I think the first question then, Kim, is adopt Elizabeth's equation or not. And then the question is, if we do, then Elizabeth, I'm sorry to do this, but we're kind of holding you to that equation at this point. You know, it's not just any equation. That's the equation is full, 100% of above grade plus 50% of below grade conditioned floor area. Yes or no on that. If the answer is yes, then you will decide what that equate. Like then we'd have a question of what does that yield? How many square feet of conditioned floor area based on that equation does that yield? If the board rejects that, then the question is just conditioned floor area in total. Does that make sense to everybody? Not seeing any confusion. Will or Andrew, I don't know if you were going to raise confusion on that.
No, Adam, Andrew, I raised one question, which I think really, at least somewhat on record, at least in the proposal, Caroline's really the only one who is giving something more tangible, where the intent was that 95% of the homes offered wouldn't be captured by this. And while I may say I disagree with why we're here, I at least agree with her intent. And I didn't know if that's a question itself, what is the board's intent? And a couple people have talked about that, but nobody's really said objectively what may that intent be.
So Andrew, I'm just going to say that I don't think any member of this board can speak for what the intent of the board is. Any member can speak of what their own intent is. And I think you need to vote on these decisions based on what your intent is. And that's all we can ask of any board member is to vote on these proposals based on what your intent as a board member is. And we're not going to go around and ask every one of these 21 board members to explain what their intent is. We don't have the time to do that. So that's all I can offer you.
Will, did you want to offer a question or a thought?
Yeah. So I think this is an interesting idea. I would love to hear from the folks who are, code officials and local governments about what they think of it. And I saw Tim's comment that he's concerned that it makes it too complicated. So we'd just love to hear from other folks on the ground what they think of that.
Well, Tim, I see you popped your hand in, so I'll let you go for it.
Yep, I stand on my comment from an enforceability standpoint. I think there's a base code that's supposed to be adopted throughout the state, and adding complexity is not going to make it easier. It may be, philosophically what some of the members think should be, but we got to come up with a code that we can sell. And that's what I always say. When I adopt a code, I have to be able to sell it to my city council, my sustainability folks, and most importantly, my customers or clientele. So, and this is making it more restrictive. And I'm going to be voting no on this, adding yet another equation. There's already so many equations. You have to be like an energy code scientist from the 21 and now especially in the 24. I mean, it's really gotten way overboard with the complexity that as it stands in the base code. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, so if it's okay with the board, I would like to move forward with this question. And then our next question about square footage. We still have 3 more questions related to home size and 29 more questions related to residential code proposals to get through in the next, well, whatever time we have left together. So I appreciate the sort of the consensus building, but I think what we want to do is just, I think we just need to start making some decisions. So we're going to ask this question here. Does the board want to adopt this equation? And the equation for determining the square footage is conditioned floor area above grade and 50% of the conditioned floor area below grade. And I'll just make these, sorry, doing live slide edits is always so fun. We're going to change these to A, B, C to keep consistent here. Oh, no, let's see if I can do that. So vote for option A is yes, you would like to use this equation for determining square footage that is what would be a large home. No is you do not want to use this equation, and a C is to abstain from this vote. Vote, is that a vote or a question you have?
That's a vote. I'm just trying to get this over with.
Okay, votes for option A, please raise your hand. If you would like to adopt this equation, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 10 hands for option A. You guys can lower your hands, thank you. If you would not like to adopt this equation, please raise your hand.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was a vote for Kim on B. So that's 9 votes for option B. You guys can lower your hands, thank you. And if anyone would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, 1 abstain. So that is a majority to, no, it's not a majority. Thank you, Adam.
Nothing won.
Nothing won.
Nothing won. That's the challenge we keep running into is if you know, especially if we have abstention votes. Yeah, we got 10 votes out of 20 in favor of yes. If we can't get a yes, then this doesn't move forward. So
okay, so in that case,
I guess the only thing I would say is, Will, based on you were the only abstention, do you want to change your vote to make a difference on that? I mean, I guess if you change it to no, then it doesn't change anything. But if you change it to yes, it would. So
I
give you that opportunity.
Yeah, I'll change it to yes.
Okay, well, so then that would be a majority in favor of this.
Okay, cool. Okay, so in sum, the board has voted to use the equation of the metric of conditioned floor area and this subsequent equation of all conditioned floor area above grade and 50% of the conditioned floor area below grade as the square footage measurement that determines a large home. Okay, so based on that, we need to decide what that square footage threshold is. I'm not going to jump into any more conversation about this. I think we are just going to jump to a vote as we did before. If we don't get clean consensus on one of these options, we will do the top 2, narrow from there. Okay, what square footage threshold should be for a large home using, oh man. Well, actually, let me update it on this one. Great, using the area metric determined in the previous poll. Looks like I had already planned for this. Okay, so board members in favor of option A as 3,500 square feet as that large home threshold, please raise your hand.
Kim, can you share your screen again?
Oh, am I not sharing?
I see it.
I see it, yeah.
I see your screen.
Oh.
That's weird. I'm not seeing it.
I'm sorry, Kate, let me try stopping and resharing, and maybe that will fix it for you. Give me 1 second.
I think Zoom may be out to get us today.
Really is. Okay, hopefully, Kate, that brings it back up once it shows.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So I apologize, everybody. I was not tracking your votes. If you would like to vote for option A, 3,500 square feet, please raise your hand.
Yes.
Kim, I got you for that one. Thank you. Okay, so that's 3 hands plus Kim. So that's 4 votes for option A. Thank you, guys. Option B, if you'd like 3,800 square feet to be the metric, please, or the threshold, excuse me, please raise your hand. Okay, I have one vote for option B. Thank you. You can lower your hand. If you would like 4,000 square feet to be the threshold, please raise your hand. Okay, we've got 2 votes for option C. And if you would like, you guys can lower your hands. If you'd like option D to be the threshold, please raise your hand. Okay, I have 13 votes for option D, so that is a clear majority. So I don't think we need a revote or a second vote on this one. So we will move forward with 5,000 square feet of conditioned floor area above grade, including 50% of the conditioned floor area below grade as the threshold for large homes. All right, and we're not done talking about home size. So the next question we have for everybody is, does the board want to add an extra large home size into the code that would have to comply with Appendix RC? And for this, as a reminder, we will be using that same definition for what is encompassed in a square footage. So this is just the question, not what is the square footage or anything like that. Are you interested in adding this? So welcome board comments, questions, thoughts, and Dan, I see your hand up, so I will go to you first.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
No worries, Dan. Any board member discussion? I know we talked about this at the last meeting, so if anyone has any thoughts they would like to add or share before we vote. Okay, I'm not seeing hands, so with that, we will go forward with a vote. If you would like to add new requirements from Appendix RC to apply to extra large homes, please, that's option A. Please raise your hand.
Again, that's a yes for me.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, thank you. I had 15 hands plus Kim, so that's 16 votes for option A. If you would not like to add new requirements for extra large homes in the code, please raise your hand now. Okay, I see 0 votes for option B, and if you'd like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 4 abstentions. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. So that is 16 votes for option A, which means we'll move forward with adding new requirements from Appendix RC to apply to extra large homes. Now, the next question that we have for everybody is, what is that square footage threshold? So these are the ones that came out through the proposal itself. I think Kim's original proposal, I just want to clarify, was the 7,000 square feet. And the 5,000 square and Adam, remind me what that was for conditioned floor area.
Yeah, I think the 5,000 was only thrown out because as an option because 3,500 was an option for the smaller. So now that we've landed on 5,000 for the large, obviously it no longer makes sense to use 5,000 in this case. So I think we can just get rid of 5,000. We can put 7,000, and then if anyone wants to offer up a different option, I would say please do.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Okay, so we'll have 7 minutes for board discussion on this. And per Adam's point, if anyone would like to offer a different square footage threshold, please do so. But if any board members have comments or questions or thoughts on this proposal, please raise your hand. Kate.
Just a clarifying question that we would calculate the square footage the same way.
Correct.
Thanks.
No, I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand. Can you hear me okay?
I think we can hear you, Kim. Go for it.
Okay, I just want to throw out the square footage of 6,000 based on this calculation formula and see what people think.
Okay, thank you, Kim. All right, any other board thoughts? You guys want to move past this just as much as we do? Cool. I am not seeing any other thoughts, so we'll have our 2 options to vote between will be 6,000 square feet and 7,000 square feet as that extra large home size threshold, using the area metric that we determined previously. So 100% of condition floor area above grade, 50% of condition floor area below grade. Board members in support, oh, Andrew, yeah, was that a vote or a question?
No, I still thought there was going to be a C, some amount to be determined, but I can at least add that if I take what one could consider an attainable home or an affordable home, if that would be that amount below the 24th upper percentile, I would have to almost have at least a 1,500 square foot spread from lower end above grade plane to anywhere approaching the upper end. So even the 6,000 feels low, the 7,000 feels low. I don't think anything below 7,500 should even be on this list. And I'm not even trying to speak on behalf of custom home builders. I'm just trying to be practical based upon my own data.
Andrew, would you
Yeah.
like to?
Yeah, I'd like to at least propose 7,500 is or higher, but I'd almost pick something higher. But anything below 7,500, I didn't think should be on here.
Andrew, I added 7,500 for you here, but if you'd rather that higher, happy to change that.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that, or just pick a number and keep going?
Well, Tom's got his hand up, so Tom, I'll pass it to you and see what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, just providing more information actually, but I had ChatGPT spit it out into a table, and this doesn't use our equation, but they're saying that 7,500 square feet is 98th percentile and 10,000 square feet is 99th percentile. That's all square feet above and below.
Are you sure that's below or just above?
I asked it to provide above and below. And so it's a little bit unclear what the data source is. U.S. Census Bureau, real estate market reports, and property tax assessments, above and below.
And can you repeat the numbers again for us, Tom?
Yeah, without the equation that we've decided on, at 7,500 square feet and above is 98th percentile, roughly. And 10,000 square feet and above is 99th percentile.
So Tom, just to because you were saying not including the equation, that even puts it further towards the end of the spectrum, right? Because we're only accounting for half of the below grade area. So
right.
those numbers that you just said were like more conservative than ours would have been because of the equation that we adopted. So just making everyone aware of that.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. That was a great idea that you had.
AI for the win.
That, yeah. Jess.
If it's helpful, I just wanted to provide an illustrative example. I was on Zillow thinking of a particular home for sale in Breckenridge right now. It is all but 7,500 square feet. Its basement is only 500 square feet, so it's 7,000 feet. It would be like 7,200 feet with this equation, and it is currently listed for sale at $11.8 million.
Thank you, Jess. Okay, so it seems like we feel comfortable at least with these numbers on the board here. So I think unless there are any other comments, we could go to a vote. So using the equation that we just voted on, board members that would like to have 6,000 square feet as the extra large home threshold, please raise your hand.
Okay, for me.
You got it. Okay, I have 3 votes for 6,000. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. Board members that would like to have 7,000 square feet as the extra large home metric, please raise your hand. Okay, I've got 9 votes for 7,000. Thank you guys. You can lower your hands. And then 7,500 square feet, if that's the number you'd like to vote for, please raise your hand. All right, that is 8 votes for 7,500. Okay, so that is not a majority. So what we will do is eliminate the 6,000 square feet option and revote using just 7,500 and 7,000 as the options. Hopefully my computer will load. There we go. So your options are 7,000 or 7,500. And so those who would like to vote for 7,000 square feet as the threshold in our revote, please raise your hand now. Yep. Okay, so that's 8 plus Kim, so that's 9 votes for 7,000. Thank you guys. You can lower your hands. And then if you'd like to vote for 7,500 square feet, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 11 votes for 7,500 square feet. So 7,500 square feet will be, using the equation that we have, will be the extra large home square footage threshold. Amazing. Thank you guys for moving through that one so quickly. So the final question we have on home size, I hope you all did your homework. Within the board proposal document, there were 2 different options for how to include the requirements for Appendix RG as they RC, excuse me, as they apply to extra large homes. So Adam, I'm assuming you're jumping in so you can explain them. And then we'll have a discussion and a vote here on which approach. So Adam, over to you.
Thanks, Kim. And just to be very clear, that these 2 options would result in the same outcome. So you're not voting based on outcome. What you're voting on is basically the level of complexity in the base code language versus the determination to reference Appendix RC. So I think it was included on another slide, but I think I just wanted to kind of outline the pros and cons of each of these options. So the pro of option number 1 is that it makes very few amendments necessary to the code language. You just add essentially a couple of references to Appendix RC based on the home size, and you're done. The con of that is then, you know, when a person who's trying to comply with this code is reading the code, then they have to go reference Appendix RC instead of seeing the code requirements right there in the code. And then option 2 is basically just the reverse of that, merging all of the code requirements into the base code. The pro is that you are more easily referenceable, but the con is that it's a much more complex set of amendments. So that I just wanted to offer that. The outcome is the same. They would have to comply with the requirements of Appendix RC either way, but it's just about the level of complexity in the amendments and the requirements to have to reference other things.
Thank you, Adam. So I do have slides that show option 1 and option 2, but if you all have the board proposal document available in your own computers, I recommend you pull it up. But we'll have some board discussion and questions, comments before we vote here. Any thoughts from board members? Please raise your hand. Elizabeth?
Can I just ask if the folks who lead their jurisdictions have any opinions on which works better for you all?
Ron?
From my perspective, having it as a separate appendix so that you go to that, I think it keeps the whole amendment package simpler and easier to follow, since most folks aren't going to need to go to this to bog down the code with all this extra language. I think just makes that whole set of amendments more confusing. So I would encourage to keep it as a separate referenced appendix.
Thanks, Ron. And so that will be option 1 on this slide. Tim?
Totally agree. Well done, Ron. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Brad?
A third vote for that in support of Ron's comment.
Okay.
Thanks all. That makes it easier.
Great. Okay, thank you guys. So unless I see no more hands, so I think we could go forward with a vote here. So what code language approach do you all want to take to incorporate Appendix RC for extra large homes? Option 1 is what was just endorsed by Ron, Brad, and Tim to just reference Appendix RC. Option 2 is to embed all of Appendix RC into the code language. So board members that would like to vote for option 1, please raise your hand. All right, that is 19 hands for option 1. Thank you, guys.
Did Kim Wheels want to vote verbally on that one, or just because I think she was the only one who didn't vote there, and I didn't hear a vote from her, so.
Kim, did you want to vote verbally on
She's
that?
still on.
Maybe going through security or
Oh,
actively
I
recording
think
the
she dropped off, so I believe
Okay.
19 is all we have. We can do the option 2 anyway, but
Sure. Board members that would like to vote for option 2, please raise your hand. Okay. Oh, Kristen. Okay. So 0 votes for option 2. Kristen, did you have a thought or comment you wanted to add? I think your hand was
No,
maybe...
I just left it up. Sorry.
Oh, okay, cool. No worries. All right, so we'll move forward with option 1 as a reference to Appendix RC in the code. Well, thank you, everybody. Great work. I know that took longer than anticipated, but that conversation always does. So I am just proud that we got through it before the end of today's meeting.
now everyone knows how the sausage gets made. This is it.
Okay, so take a moment. We are going to reset our brains. I mean, we've been talking about residential, we've been talking about home size. Now we are going to switch to the specific residential provisions within the low energy and carbon code. And I can move into slideshow mode here in a second. We will get as far through these proposals as we can today, and then hope to squeeze everything else in at the end in our final meeting next week. So starting with section R402, we have 2 proposals, one from Brad and one from Dan. For section R403, you will have noticed there was a proposal in there for Jess, from Jess. We're actually going to move that to when we talk about R409. So for R403, we've got a proposal from Elizabeth and then one more from Jess. I'm going to guess that that's all we're going to get through today. So I will just suggest that we jump right into those proposals. And Brad, I will start with you.
Yeah, thanks. So this is in the within the table, and I think there was some back and forth on this with some of the code consultants. The concern was on some of the multi-family properties, as you can see in the rationale, that even the common walls between units were considered exterior walls. So the intent behind this is just to provide additional clarification on any wall, not sometimes I think the code can be understood as a perimeter or an exterior wall on the outside, let's say, of the floor area or of a home. And the intent is that any wall, even an interior wall that would be adjacent to an attic, should still have air sealing between the top plate of that wall and the unconditioned attic space. So the addition of "and those" is to clarify any concern that a multifamily common wall from one unit to the next is considered an exterior wall. So hopefully that is a decent explanation, but I think the rationale, if folks can read it, is a good explanation.
Thanks, Brad. We'll go to board questions, comments. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I like the intent here because I think this helps helps set up for success for when you have to do unitary testing. But I don't know that where that would be defined that a party wall counts as an exterior wall. Is that something that we could point to? I would think that a wall between 2 conditioned spaces does not count as an exterior wall.
Yeah, and that came from Hope, and I don't believe Hope is on right now, but
no, but I would ask maybe Anna, do you have any comments on that?
I can pull it up. I can't remember the exact code section, so give me 1 minute.
We could maybe resolve that by even just defining as walls that encompass the dwelling unit or something like that, Brad, so that it's not necessarily whether it's exterior or not. Because I think I get what your point is, right? Like that, and that isn't, it's an important one.
So I think, Elizabeth, I would maybe just defer to see if Anna can find the code section, because maybe if it already says somewhere that exterior, party walls are exterior walls, then somehow we don't need to address that, but.
Sounds good.
So Kim, for the sake of time, while Anna's looking that up, I maybe propose we go to the next proposal and then we come back to vote on this one once Anna gets that answer.
That works for me. All right, in that case, Dan, you had the next proposal, so I will pass it over to you to share your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, my proposal is, since the code allows for reduced ceiling and wall insulation for garages and sunrooms, we in our jurisdiction run into a lot of issues with existing slabs, especially, and how to get those insulated, because that is required. So my proposal would be to actually exempt the slab insulation if they opt to use the prescriptive R values from table 402.1.3.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'll go to board comments. So Carolyn, then Tim.
Yeah, Kim, I just wanted to name this as, I think, consistent with one of the proposals I submitted as well. Which I didn't see on your in your package, but I'd spoken about this existing slab issue as well, and so just want to offer my support for this.
Thanks, Carolyn, and apologies if I missed that. Feel free to send that to me again, and I'll make sure it's captured. I don't know how I would have skipped that one, so apologies there. Tim?
Yeah, thanks. This is an interesting proposal. We've run into this before. I started doing a code search for sunrooms and definitions and where they're, energy code and IRC codes. And I found that the only place that sunroom categories, there's a standard that talks about the category 1 through 5. And that is only referenced in the wind design out of the IRC. I always thought it was actually also included in the energy code part. I think it might have been many moons ago. But the category 5 is a sunroom that's enclosed walls, designed to be heated and cooled and open to the main structure. So it's not a, thermally insulated. So I don't know if that has anything to do with this or clarification that, it would apply to maybe categories 1 through 4 or something, just to toss that out for discussion.
Thanks, Tim. Dan, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I don't believe that the reduction in the insulation applies to specific climate zones, but I might be wrong about that.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and your exception is just the third bullet, correct? Which is to allow the omission of the slab edge requirement as long as the rest of the requirements are met.
That's correct. Yeah.
So just for clarity, he's not proposing a change to the others. That is whatever is already there. And yeah, and we're a proponent of supporting retention of existing slabs. So I think that would be useful.
Thanks, Carolyn. Tim?
Would you be open for, similar to like what a res check allows, increasing some of the insulation or fenestration for above grade to do a trade-off for this area?
Yeah, Tim, that actually is my proposal, that I would go back to the full R value requirement for R 402.1.3.
Okay, thank you.
Ron?
In Boulder County, we've had a lot of sunrooms, and what we find when I look at the energy modeling that sometimes accompanies them is that they have huge nighttime losses because they have so much glazing. So I find that when they're connected to conditioned space, they are or indirectly conditioned or directly conditioned in some ways, there are huge energy penalties for the home. So we have ended up in a situation where we don't create any allowances for sunrooms. And so what people have been doing is just building them as separate thermally isolated structures that aren't heated. We maintain the thermal boundary to the house. They can connect them, they can have doors, they can open, but all those doors, all those connections have to be treated as a full exterior wall, because there's so much thermal loss through the glazing. The slab insulation, I think, would be the same thing, that there would be significant losses through that slab, and pretty problematic from an energy point of view.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Any other thoughts on this before we move to a vote? Brad and then Tim.
Yeah, one last little comment just to provide some context. About 8 inches of concrete, so think 8 inches thick concrete is a thermal value of less than R1. So I think, to Ron's point, there are potential significant losses even through just the slab alone.
Thanks, Brad. Okay. Well, I think we've heard a good sort of summary of board comments on this proposal. So let's move to a vote. Does the board want to update section R402.2.13 as proposed? If you'd like to vote yes to accept this proposal, please raise your hand now. Okay, I got 13 hands for A. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. If you would not like to accept this proposal, please raise your hand now. Option B.
Sorry, I don't know if you counted me on the first one. I think my hand was lingering.
I think I saw your hand go down, Brad. I was checking on it.
Thank you.
Okay, so three votes for option B. No. Thank you, guys. And any board members that would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay. That's 2 abstentions. So thank you, Dan, for this proposal. That proposal passes. All right, so we're gonna swoop back to this first one. Anna, I will go to you to hopefully share what you found.
I think I'm gonna make it more complicated. So sorry in advance. So in my research here, I do find the definition where party walls are located is in section 706.1.1 party walls. And it talks through how they are required to be constructed as a firewall, which requires sealing at the top. Firewalls are required within townhomes, separation between townhouses and I'm gonna say this wrong because I've read so many code sections in the last 5 minutes, between homes that have 2 dwelling units. And then fire barriers are required in multifamily units. So it's technically not a firewall. Ron is smiling and laughing at me, so I don't know if I'm saying something incorrect. Jump in here, Ron. But what I have learned is essentially all of these fire partitions, firewalls, a fire partition is still required to be sealed at the top and the bottom to reduce the spread of fire. But it is not structural like a firewall or a party wall would be. Go ahead, Elizabeth, jump in.
I was just going to suggest, just to remove the ambiguity, Brad, could you add another category in here to just add party walls to this requirement? Because I think that's your intent, right?
I think that was Hope's concern.
Or if there's another way to define that without getting into the exterior wall messiness.
Well, I think that was the intent of my adding and those. So any wall with a plate that's adjacent to an unconditioned space. So, yeah, and I'll kind of echo what Anna said. The only thing that I was able to find really quickly was exterior wall envelope, definition of system or assembly of exterior wall components, including exterior wall finish materials that provides protection of the building structural members. So I think probably something very similar. But that's all I was able to find.
I think the trouble here, Brad, is if we're looking to make sure that this sealing is done between residential units in a multifamily building, my very uneducated reading of the fire code is showing me that fire barriers are not considered to be exterior walls, nor are they adjacent to unconditioned space. So if I, as a very, oh, go ahead, Tim, jump in.
Oh, okay. So since this would be applying to both 3-story and less R2s and single and 1 and 2 family and townhomes, correct? Just for clarity.
Correct.
Then the way the IBC comes into play from, you're correct, a firewall, in the eyes of the building code, a firewall creates 2 separate buildings. It's considered equivalent to not really an exterior wall, but it separates. So it's a firewall. Fire barriers are put in place for shaft wall construction, and they go through systems. But the separation between dwelling units in an apartment building is similar. It requires fire partitions, similar to in a horizontal fire rated assembly between stacked apartments, similar to a party wall in the IRC that would be either a 1 or a 2 hour fire rated separation. So I think the concept of what maybe Brad's trying to do here is, when we require blower door testing, these areas have to be sealed or it's not going to work. Whether it's adjacent to another unit or adjacent to, say, an unfinished, if you have like a 1-story townhome with an attic space and then a 2-story next to it, so I think this is a good requirement to add in here just to make sure that the sealing is being done correctly. It kind of goes back to the whole onus of why we're sealing stuff up. Thanks.
So I guess just to clarify, Tim, and sorry, Brad, if I don't want to speak for you, but if the intent of this section is to require sealing between residential units, which I think is what you're getting after, Brad, correct?
I would say it'd be more clarification on any wall top plate that is adjacent to any unconditioned space. Wasn't thinking so much in terms of unit to unit in a multifamily building as much as I was in interior wall top plate versus as it's and can be interpreted, because I've had to answer this question a few times in Fort Collins, that we only need to seal the exterior walls of a house. Let's say we don't need to, and a lot of times they staple up sill seal or something like that. We don't need to do those walls, let's say even on a second floor that are on the interior. We just need to go around the perimeter exterior walls, correct? And I'm like, no. It's all exterior walls. And in my communication with another code consultant outside of those on the call, the intent written in the code was that those would be still considered exterior wall because they are adjacent to unconditioned space. But the code just wasn't written real well. So we included this in our code in Fort Collins because I've had to address this question a couple times with a couple builders.
Thanks, Brad. Adam, did you want to add anything there?
I think the only thing I was going to ask about was my understanding of Hope's concern was that if you didn't seal the top plates between multifamily units, that there was a concern that with the unit sampling allowance for multifamily, that individual units could potentially fail testing because of that. That was what I thought her concern was. And
That's what I thought as well.
Yeah. so Brad,
That's why I
don't know.
was
Yeah.
talking about multifamily.
So that if you don't seal the top plate, like you're going to have a problem with the fact that individual units may fail.
Yeah, and I think regardless, it would still be good practice.
So it sounds like what you're saying is you'd be okay, just if I can try to interpret what you're saying, it sounds like you would be okay with the inclusion of exterior walls, party walls, and those adjacent to unconditioned space.
I think where that gets difficult though, Adam, is that per the definition in the code of a party wall, the walls in between multifamily units do not, to me, are not defined as party walls in a residential construction.
So if they're not party walls and they're not exterior walls, then what are they?
Fire barriers.
Fire barriers. I see. Okay.
Is my understanding, and somebody who reviews this more often than I do, feel free to jump in. And I think that's where I'm getting tripped up because the code very clearly states, and Kim, I can link you this little code section.
The
Is that a
technical
party
language,
wall? Oh, go ahead.
they're called fire partitions in the IBC.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
So I see some hands. Ron, yeah, go for it. Ron, somehow, I don't know why you're not muted, but I can't hear you anymore. Still no sound coming through. I don't know.
Your headset died. No.
Nope. Okay, well, Ron figures that out. Adam, yeah. Do you have that?
Oh, nothing.
I guess what I want to offer, if we don't feel like we can get to a conclusion on this, Hope will be joining us for our next meeting. I don't know if it's worth getting additional clarification from her or if you all feel comfortable in this conversation moving something forward here. Elizabeth?
A question for Brad. Would it meet the intent to just define this as walls that enclose the dwelling unit?
I don't know. I would want to put some thought behind that.
Okay.
Does that still, let's go to like a single family house then. Does an interior framed wall that would be adjacent to an attic, would that still be included in it?
Probably not.
And that's my intent with this, just to make sure that any wall that has a plate that is adjacent to an attic is sealed.
Ron, do you want to try?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay. So I don't want to complicate things further, but I missed a little bit of the conversation there. But one of the things that we have to be a little bit cautious of is when we're dealing with this fire separation between units, especially in a multifamily or a townhome situation, is that there's UL listings for that assembly that are tricky to balance with the air seal requirement in the code. This has been a bugaboo that a number of folks have been working on, probably for 3 code cycles now, trying to fix it, and it's tricky because some of the products that we use for air sealing are not necessarily tested to be compatible with the products that we're using for fire separation, and so it gets a little bit dicey when we start talking about requiring air sealing on party walls. I think personally, I think that this language that Brad has suggested, I think works, because I think it sort of does make clear that we need some sort of air sealing to occur anytime we have any wall that is adjacent to an unconditioned space. And I think I see that as a reasonable goal. And that way we don't get into this language of, is it a party wall? Is it a firewall? Is it an exterior wall? Doesn't really matter. If this wall is adjacent to a space that's unconditioned, it needs air sealing. And I think Brad's language gets us there.
Thank you, Ron. Brad and then Elizabeth.
Yeah, and I'll just, to Ron's point, I didn't want to include that specifically because of that UL listing. And it is something that we have to communicate and have conversations with regulators. So I didn't want to complicate it and include that intentionally. So those were left out on purpose.
Thanks, Brad. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think I'm better understanding the intent, but I definitely am not interpreting exterior walls as adjacent to unconditioned or walls adjacent to unconditioned space as, the ones that are like, touching at the top of the wall. If there's a way that that could be rephrased and even say kind of what you just described, interior walls that touch the attic space or something like that. If there's a better way to indicate that, I just think that would be really helpful for people to understand what is meant.
Adjacent or abut unconditioned space.
Abutting. I like the word abutting. Yeah. Yeah. When I think adjacent, I'm picturing the full wall, like the plane of the wall, right? Not necessarily the linear top of the wall. Even abutting is sort of like that tells me next to. I think I'd seek for clarification there. Otherwise, I think this will catch people by surprise. Like we have to find a way to be much clearer about your intent here, because that just took me 10 minutes to even understand it with you sitting right here explaining it.
Okay, Brad, do you?
Yeah, I just defer to, some of the code officials on the call and, whatever they may interpret that as, and if they have some suggestions.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left. It would be really cool if we could resolve this before we leave the meeting, but I understand if that's not feasible today. Brad, would you feel comfortable changing adjacent to abut? Is that the main thing that we want to make sure is clarified in this language? And would anybody oppose that?
I don't know if that really captures it. I'm not sure if someone reading this will still understand what that means.
Okay, so maybe what I'll recommend is, again, reminding the board that we have a chance to figure this out in draft 2, sit with this language for a bit longer. And I apologize that, we planned for this proposal in a day where Hope wasn't here and she was the one with the major flag on this. So I want to recognize that. Do we feel comfortable doing a quick vote on this? Again, remembering we can change if needed in final draft.
I just thought of something. Could we even add the words interior walls that abut unconditioned spaces? I think that might flag those conditions that Brad is trying to address. Like instead of saying and those, could you say and interior walls that are adjacent to unconditioned space or abut unconditioned space? I think that might help to highlight that. Does that make sense, Brad?
I don't have issue with that.
Okay.
I think it's that are, so, and interior walls that are adjacent to or abut unconditioned space, correct? So Kim, you can unstrike that are. Say after two, say adjacent or abut.
Is that how you spell abut?
That's right, yeah. One of those weird words.
It's telling me it's wrong, but I think it's okay. Okay. Spelling issues aside. It doesn't love that word, but that's okay. Can we vote? Are folks okay with that change? Okay, it is now 12, so we're gonna do the quickest vote we've ever done. If you would like to update this text according to Brad's proposal as we just revised it, yes, please raise your hand. Okay, 15 hands, yes. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. If you would like to vote no on this proposal, please raise your hand. Tim, is that a lingering hand? Thank you. Okay, I have one vote for no. Thank you, Andrew. Anyone who would like to abstain, please raise your hand. Okay, one abstention. So this passes. Thank you all. I will do the quickest wrap up of all time. Our next meeting is Tuesday at 10 a.m. We will be going through all remaining residential proposals. Please, 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 please read the residential proposals. Come prepared, knowing what they are, what we're going to be talking about, and what your thoughts are on them. It will really help expedite this process. There's a couple proposal follow-up items that we will work with board members on after this. I think the big one is that C402 section. So Tim, Brad, and Kevin will work with you guys on that. But otherwise, thank you all. Big meeting, lots to talk about. Hopefully you guys don't need too much more coffee to get through the rest of your days, but thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.